You are listening to the Booktrospective podcast, a podcast for all types of books. And even though we read all types of books across all different types of genres, we want to give a disclaimer. Many of our books and a lot of our content sometimes is intended for mature audiences. And we don't believe in censorship, but we do want our listeners to have the opportunity to decide if our episode or podcast is good for them. So, with that, let's get into the episode. Hey, it's Dominique.
And Keely.
And you are listening to Booktrospective. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, y'all.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it's going to be, well, when you guys are listening to this, it's 2024. But, I mean, it's only a week away.
Yeah.
So, that's crazy. This year, like, flew by.
I swear.
I like even years. Is that weird? I feel like even years are like my good years, and odd years are like, meh. So I'm excited because, I don't know, I'm strange. But yes, I'm so excited. So how was your Christmas?
It was Christmas, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, it's over. So, yeah.
My house is in shambles. It's disgusting, and I am dying on the inside. But I don't have a free day until like Saturday. So I'm trying to hold off, but I need to clean it and get it back in some way, shape, or form. I'm getting ready to like go through the toy room. Like, stuff's gotta go. It's gotta get out. I'm like, tell my daughter, I'm like, can I get rid of the Barbie dream house? She's like, yeah, I don't play with that. I was like, okay, can I get rid of like the toy kitchen from when you were 1? No, I still play with that. She's 10. Okay, so okay, but now that's over. So hopefully like that spending is over and I can save some money. That's a joke, probably. But, okay, so so before we jump into this week's episode, which we're doing, I'm so excited. We're doing A Court of Mist and Fury. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. And I'm extremely excited, but I forgot to ask about this at the end or in our last episode, just kind of our year in review, looking at 2024. So, Keely, do you have any books this year that you're looking forward to reading?
Ooh. Yes. I am looking forward to reading Reckless, which is the sequel to Powerless. Yeah. And I'm sure there's more, but that's the one that I've been like anxiously waiting for. Ugh. What about you?
I have 3. So obviously, Crescent City 3 is coming out at the end of this month. I think it's January 30th. So House of Flame and Shadow. Keely is not that far into the Sarah J. Maas world, so she has got to hold off. But I will somehow, between all the other books I have to read, I'm going to listen or read that. And I am so excited. My mom just like finished all. She was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, so I have someone to talk to about it. So there's that. King of Sloth, I believe, Anna Wong, that's coming out. And then I mentioned in the last episode, I did read Hunting and Haunting Adeline, and I follow HD Carlton on TikTok. She just had released or dropped that she's releasing a book this year. It's called Where's Molly, which if you read Hunting Adeline, basically during Adeline's like ordeal, there's a diary she finds from a girl named Molly, and like it's not really like a huge component of it, but this book obviously is going to be about whoever Molly was, so that's probably going to be like a dark romance. Maybe not romance, I don't know, but so I'm kind of excited. I think I want to read that too, so I wanted to throw this little bit in there. I meant to ask during the last episode and I forgot, so things happen. My brain is mush all the time. So but yeah, so I'm super excited. I have no idea how long this episode's gonna be. I'm going to try to not make it super long, also not super brief. I don't know, just bear with me, you guys. By now, if you're still listening to me, you know. If you're new here, now you know. So before we get started, I feel like last week really threw me off. Now I don't know what we do anymore. The blurb. Keely does the blurb.
Yes. So let's start off with that. Feyre has undergone more trials than one human woman can carry in her heart. Though she's now been granted with powers and lifespan of the High Fae, she is haunted by her time under the mountain and the terrible deeds she performed to save the lives of Tamlin and his people. As her marriage to Tamlin approaches, Feyre's hollowness and nightmares consume her. She finds herself split into 2 different people, one who upholds her bargain with Rhysand, the High Lord of the feared Night Court, and the one who lives out her life in the Spring Court with Tamlin. While Feyre navigates a dark web of politics, passion, and dazzling power, a greater evil looms. She might just be the key to stopping it, but only if she can harness her harrowing gifts, heal her fractured soul, and decide how she wishes to shape her future and the future of a world in turmoil.
Whoop, whoop. Okay, so Goodreads, you have a typo in your blurb and you were messing Keely up.
Threw me off.
Also, if you heard noise in the background, there was people, but I meant to say this is also officially our last time recording
Whoop, whoop.
in Keely's old bookstore because she's moving. Yay! So she's officially moving. I think we said that last episode, but now we are for sure going to be out of here. So we may have new sounds. I don't know, but we'll test it out over there. So, okay. So if you had a word to describe Akamath, what would you say?
And I've thought about this all day, and the one word that keeps coming back to my mind is betrayal.
Ooh, okay. Mine is flirty.
Okay, yeah.
I just love, there's like, so I really have a hard time between this one and ACOTAR, because to me, they're not even comparable, because they're like two different plot devices.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna talk about ACOTAR because it's, the next one, but I just, so like, because to me, like, Akamath is like a love story. Like, there's other elements, but I feel like that's the plot of this. Even though all those other things are important too. But yeah, so flirty would be mine. So, all right, so spoiler-free summary. I guess I can kind of recap ACOTAR. So if you did not listen to the ACOTAR episode, I don't know what episode that is, but it's one of our episodes, so go back and listen to it and read it. But ACOTAR, or A Court of Thorns and Roses, is number 1 in this series currently. This is an unfinished series. Sarah J. Maas is still writing. I think she is currently writing book technically 5. There is a novella in this book, or in this series, so technically she's writing book 5. But ACOTAR is basically a book that starts out with Feyre. She's the youngest of 3 sisters who is the only one who kind of like fends for her family, and she goes out into the woods to hunt all the time, and she lives in a world where fairies exist. They know of them, but they live above this wall that was built to separate them because humans used to be enslaved by fairies. But she goes out one day, she sees a wolf that she assumes to be a fairy, but she basically is like, kill or be killed, so she kills it. Because of her actions, another fairy comes and kind of Beauty and the Beast takes her, and she's kind of held hostage, not exactly like she can leave, but like kind of not. And she learns that this fairy is actually the High Lord of the Spring Court. There are 7 courts in Prythian, which is the fairy world, and Tamlin is the High Lord of that court, so she lives with Tamlin and his emissary Lucien, who is Fae, and all the servants and everything, and she starts to build a love for him, and she doesn't really know it, but there is a big bad going on behind the scenes, and as that bad is brewing, Tamlin decides to send her back to the human world, but she basically realizes that he's probably in danger, so she goes back into the fairy world to save not only Tamlin, but the entire fairy world of Prythian, and she does that and ends up kind of sacrificing herself and dies, but because she does sacrifice herself, all 7 of the High Lords kind of bind together, and they bring her back to life as a Fae. So she is now a Fae female. She is no longer a human female. And she goes home to the Spring Court with Tamlin. And that is where ACOTAR ends. During ACOTAR also, she's introduced to Rhysand. He is the High Lord of the Night Court. And he is like, I don't want to say he's the villain. He is like the anti-hero of ACOTAR. He is a morally gray character, so we love those.
Yep.
Yeah, they have like an interesting relationship that they leave off as well at the end of ACOTAR. So, A Court of Mist and Fury, spoiler-free summary. So we open up with Feyre and Tamlin. They are in the Spring Court. They are preparing for a wedding. Tamlin proposed. Yay! I wish you could see my face. And so they are supposed to be getting married, but Feyre is really suffering from PTSD, as is expected because she was tortured under the mountain. So she is really suffering, and she made a bargain with Rhys and ACOTAR that she is supposed to spend 1 week a month with him. And so he basically comes and collects her on the brink of a very important event. And she begins to spend 1 week a month with Rhysand in the Night Court. And her and Tamlin's relationship is really strained, not only because of her time in the Night Court with Rhysand, but because she just feels so smothered. She's struggling with her PTSD. And Tamlin honestly is struggling with his control and fear for her. You know, I do think it's all out of love, but he doesn't know how to show her that correctly. And so it comes to a head at a really nasty point, and Feyre abandons the Spring Court completely and ends up in the Night Court. And so Feyre and Rhysand really grow their relationship. She's introduced to all of his friends and family in the Night Court and really becomes a part of that group. And Rhysand is concerned that there is another big bad brewing in Prythian and wants her help with that. So she basically bands together with what he calls the inner circle. That is his friends and family. And she is working with them to become a part of that group. And she also knows that Tamlin is probably fighting to get her back. So we kind of have this kind of love triangle brewing between the three of them that comes to a head at the end of the book, also with the big bad part of that. So this book does leave on a cliffhanger. It is book 2 again of a currently 4.5 series with another book being written. So that's about as spoiler free as I can get. So if you have not read A Court of Mist and Fury, or if you do not want to be spoiled, this is your spoiler warning. So.
And hold on to your butts.
Yeah, hold on to your butts because we are going to get into it. I'm so excited. All right, so open sesame, iPad. Okay. So we open with Feyre in the Spring Court, and she is really struggling from under the mountain. So she has tons of PTSD. She's having nightmares about killing those fairies. And, you know, she really wanted to kill herself after that. Had Tamlin not been the last fairy of the 3 fairies at the end of ACOTAR, she was planning on killing herself. So now she's really suffering with the fact that she killed innocent people. Pretty much every night she gets up and throws up in the middle of the night, and Tamlin does not pay her a lick of attention. Like, he basically acts like she's not doing
happening.
it. Yeah. And he also is clearly suffering because he's in beast form a lot of times. Like, he's almost like the watchdog at the foot of the bed. But they don't talk. And that's really the problem with them throughout this book, is that, like, they only communicate physically. So they have sex or they're like fighting. There's no good in between. And it's been 3 months since they were under the mountain. She's really struggling also with being a fae because she's extremely strong. Like, think about Bella in Twilight when she became a vampire, and like their strength, and she's like, that's basically like Feyre's like, I broke like 3 doors and like a really old 500-year-old vase and all this stuff. But she also still has her tattoo from her bargain with Rhysand, or Rhys. I'm calling him Rhys. I'm not saying Rhysand. I only say Rhysand when it sounds fancy. But there has been no sign of Rhys to come collect on their deal because, again, he said he wanted her 1 week out of... They agreed on 1 week a month, but it's been 3 months and they haven't seen him. She wants to go, like, out with Tamlin. Tamlin goes places all the time, and he will not let her go. He says that they're still hunting Amarantha's beast and he doesn't want her going, but Feyre doesn't need protection. Like, not only did Feyre not really need protection, I mean, she was a human, she needed protection, but like, obviously she showed that she's capable, right. But now she's also a fae. Like,
she did all of that with no powers.
And Tamlin literally laid there and watched.
Right. An illiterate human.
Illiterate.
Did this. Like,
you can let me go outside sometimes,
right.
Sir. But he's like, no. He's so overbearing and protective. And so they are also engaged now. Apparently he proposed 2 months ago. Vomit. And so now pretty much all she does is she's a trophy wife. She picks out decorations. She plans parties. They're heading into winter solstice, which is her birthday. So happy birthday, Feyre. It just passed. And she, like I said, I just put she's a glorified trophy wife. And she doesn't paint anymore. So one of the main reasons she doesn't paint is she really like lost all of her like gust soda paint, but also the color red really like the blood and all that, it really gets to her. So she's not painting right now, and she doesn't have anything else to do because none of the servants will let her help, because every time she goes to like any of them, they're always just like, oh, like thank you so much for saving our lives, and like they're just so gracious for everything she did for them. So no one lets her do anything. Tamlin doesn't, the servants don't. She's bored out of her mind. Um, Tamlin also only lets her wear dresses every day, which she hates. She does get to carry a dagger. And we meet Ianthe, and I said, the biggest bitch.
Mm.
I, I do not like Ianthe, and I'm just going to put that here now, but we'll get to that. So, Ianthe is a high priestess, so there are priestesses throughout all of Prythian. Some of them do have powers. Ianthe really has not demonstrated that she truly has any powers, but she says that she does. They're supposed to, like, you know, bless the ceremonies that they have, and like bless Tamlin and bless whatever else they bless. They bless things. And so like she's a friend of Tamlin, and like her parents were friends of Tamlin's parents, yada yada yada. And so she's there to help Feyre like with wedding planning. And Feyre really trusts her because she's basically the only person that she has to talk to. And she feels like she hasn't given her any reason not to trust her, so like why not? All the priestesses wear like blue robes. Ianthe's blonde, and she wears like a blue. She has like a blue jewel on her forehead. That's about it. She's boring. Ianthe asked Feyre if any of her family's gonna come to the wedding since they live so close to the wall, but Feyre knows like they probably don't want to, and she doesn't want them there either because she doesn't want them exposed. And it makes her think about Claire better because she really has not gotten over that either. Feyre really still refers to herself as separate from the Fae, because when she's talking to Ianthe about it, she's like, you know, they don't really like your kind, and Ianthe's like, you mean our kind because you are a Fae, and so Feyre's still really struggling with that. Ianthe also refers to Feyre as Lady, and it makes Feyre think about like no one really knows what to call Feyre because she's not High Fae because she's not born Fae, and so like no one really knows what to call her. She's also not Tamlin's mate because they don't have a mating bond. She thinks about how Ianthe looks like she could be Tamlin's mate, and is probably what Ianthe wants. And then this is where I put, she mentions how Ianthe has no power but pretends to. In total, there's 12 high priestesses, and they're all very different than what you like expect. So, like, you would think that they're kind of like nuns, but they're not. They're allowed to have sex. They're like, actually, they're like very like, I don't want to say they're promiscuous, but like they can be.
Yeah.
And they, like they're encouraged to like have sex and like get married. They are supposed to have kids, and priestesses' children are like just as revered as the children of the High Lords. Ianthe is also the youngest of all of the high priestess. And so she's talking to Feyre about the wedding, and she's like, oh, what color roses do you want? And she's like, I don't really care. But then Ianthe's like, oh, what about red? And she's like, absolutely not. Because again, she hates the color red now because of the blood. She hates her dress. It's basically like, think Princess Diana. It's like a humongous monstrosity of a dress. Even Tamlin hates it, but Queen Ianthe rules the world. So whatever. Ianthe picked it out. So whatever. Ianthe also mentions how the other priestesses actually don't really like Ianthe. And Lucian also doesn't like Ianthe. And Feyre mentions to us how Ianthe's always like, you know how like that, you see those people that's always like, they just have to like touch you. Like they touch your shoulder. Like she's like one of those kind of people. And she's always trying to corner Lucian. I'm like, poor Lulu. Like,
so pick me. Like,
yeah, she's a pick. She
girl.
is definitely a, I love Caroline Forbes. I love the Vampire Diaries, but like Caroline Forbes season 1. I have so many like pop culture references this episode. So that night, her and Tamlin have sex, and she asked Tamlin like, so when we get married, like, will they call me High Lady? And he's like, there are no High Ladies. He's like, what? He's like, no, like there's no such thing as a High Lady. Feyre confronts Lucian about keeping information from her, you know, because obviously Lucian's going out with Tamlin on all these trips, and Tamlin not only like does not let her go, but he won't even let her in like on the meetings they have when they come back. And Lucian says that, you know, Tamlin's my high lord. I have to do what he tells me to do. He's like, I'm the emissary. I'm like his first line, and like I basically set the standard, which I agree with that. Like, I mean, I get it. Lucian's really in like a difficult position. I feel like Lucian gets a lot of flack, but like I kind of get what Lucian's saying. Like he is supposed to set the example. And so they're kind of preparing for this thing called Tithe. So the next month coming up, they hold Tithe, and it happens twice a year. And all of the constituents of the Spring Court are supposed to come, and they have to pay a tithe, which they basically like. If they're farmers, they bring whatever they farm. If they fish, they bring fish, like whatever that is. And if they don't show up or if they don't pay what they're supposed to, they have like a 3-day grace period, or Tamlin will hunt them down and kill them. And Feyre just has to sit next to him, like on the throne, and like look pretty, and listen to him like berate all these people. Lucian also tells Feyre like, look, Tamlin basically like heard you die, and he's like, it's different than when the girl he loved died, because like you came back. So he's like, just give Tamlin some time to like deal with all the stuff he's going through. And he does take Feyre to this small village to try to like appease her. I'm sure Tamlin was like, here, take her here. But again, when they go, nobody wants Feyre to do anything, and they all start calling Feyre Cursebreaker. So that's like her new nickname. Okay. So we skip ahead a little bit, and the wedding is going to be the next day, and I put, Rhys is coming! Oh my god! So the wedding is coming, and the night before, like, they're kind of like having like a meet and greet or whatever, and Feyre's with Ianthe, and some of the sentries, they're basically like soldiers or whatever that work for Tamlin, are talking to Ianthe and flirting with her, and they talk to Feyre, and they're like, oh, like, you did a good job with the worm. And every time we think about the worm, we think about the Alaskan bull, the bullworm from SpongeBob. I just cannot not see that.
Yeah, that's literally the only thing I envision.
I can't not see it. I can't. And while they're talking to Feyre, they mention Rhys and say how scared he must be now that Tamlin has his powers back. And Feyre's like, then you don't know Rhysand. Ooh, burn. And Feyre basically is thinking to herself, like, she doesn't feel like she deserves a happy ending because, again, she feels bad about killing those fae under the mountain. And we go to the next day, and so Alice is getting her dressed in this ugly ass dress, and she starts walking down through the mansion or whatever, and she's walking out the front doors, and she sees Tamlin out there on the dais, and everything's going fine until she sees all these freaking red rose petals. Like, she literally said any color but red, and Ianthe did nothing but red. So she starts panicking, and like she's literally thinking to herself, like, someone save me. Like, I can't do this. So she gets up there to Tamlin, and he, like, you know, reaches out his hand like a fiance does, and she like backs up. So he's like, and like Ianthe's like, you know, come on, you know, whatever. And all she can think about is like blood on her hands, like seeing all of the red roses. And then all I can think about in the scene is like all the fan edits and stuff that people have made of this scene. But like, essentially, as this is happening, there's like thunder, boom, and then a like dark skies, and people start screaming, and then like ever so calmly, Rhys walks up, and we get a hello, Feyre darling, and I am well again. Ianthe bolted out of there, like Miss Blessed of the youth or whatever she is. Like she's gone. Tamlin like kind of like sticks his claws out, but he's a punk, so he's like, Rhys, get out of here. But yeah, whatever. And Rhys says, I'm calling in my bargain. Like, yeah, go ahead. And he's like picking like non-existent lint off of his jacket or whatever. And Feyre's like, I don't want to go with you. But girl, you were literally just calling for help. Yes, you do. And she tells Rhys, I don't want to go. Like, she's afraid to go to the night court because she's also afraid because she knows that Amarantha modeled her court after the night court. And like, she really does not like want to go. Her PTSD is like, it's rearing its ugly head. So she's like begging Tamlin, but obviously there's nothing Tamlin can do. They have a bargain. So Rhys grabs her and they winnow out of there. And they land in like this amazing, beautiful palace, and it's quiet. And she's like, I don't hear any screaming. I don't see any bodies. And he just says, welcome to the night court. And she's like, this is literally the most beautiful place I've ever seen. And I think this is, they call it the Moon Palace. I think that's what they call it. We learn later what it's called. So it's like on top of the Night Court, because the Night Court is under the mountain and this palace is like above it, because Rhys doesn't really like, he don't F with them down there for real. So like he has separate quarters. So she's up in this palace. And she looks at Rhys. She realizes he's like no longer pale because he hasn't been under the mountain for, he has been under there for 50 years. He got some sunlight. He's good now. And she tells Rhys, like, how dare you? And he's like, I rescued you. You literally were begging for someone. And she's like, no, I wasn't. Girl, yes, you were. And so he's like, he reminds her of the tattoo with the eye in her palm. And he says, like, well, you can just blame me, like, for rejecting Tamlin, because I know that's what you were getting ready to do. And he says that he wants her to take off that dress because she looks exactly like the doe-eyed damsel Tamlin and Ianthe want her to be. He asks if Tamlin ever asks why she can't go in certain rooms or why she vomits, and she just says to get out of her head. And he says likewise, because he doesn't like waking up with images of her puking every night. So all these nights that she's been puking, he basically tells her like she's been sending images of that down their bond. So he tells her how to find her room, and she's like, what? I'm not going to be like in a dungeon cell. And he's like, you're not a prisoner. Like, you're a guest. You'll be treated like a guest. No one's going to touch you. No one's going to hurt you. And she's like, where is everyone? And he says, some people do live below the mountain, but they're not allowed to enter this house. But he's like, that court below the mountain basically like runs itself. Like, he's like, I'm the president. That's the legislative branch down there. Like, I visit when I have to. And so she asks if he'll take her there, and he says that like, this is my home, she'll stay here, the court is his occupation, and like he doesn't like them to cross, like this is his pleasure, that's his business, basically. So she turns and like whirls her shoe at him and hits him in the back of the head. And he's pissed. He's like, how dare you? So she throws the other one and he like catches it and literally like missed it. I love when he does his miss power. Like, I love Rhys. Like, his powers, he is literally the most amazing. Like, of all of like the fictional characters, I think Rhys is my favorite. I do love Azriel, but like Rhys, literally, like, if I had to pick one, I'm going Rhysand. I'm going Rhys. So yeah. So he's amazing. So she goes to her room. Literally, she has a monstrosity of a bathtub. It's literally an infinity pool, and it's like rolling off the side of a mountain. She does rip off the dress. She hates it. And she like is thinking about how she didn't really want a wedding until their mating bond happened, or like she felt more worthy, or that Tamlin actually faced his own nightmares or relaxed his grip on her, which none of those things are happening. So like they really shouldn't. They need premarital counseling, and they're not getting it. So she basically just like goes to bed, and she wakes up in the morning, and Rhys is kind of like tugging that bond, telling her to come to breakfast. And he has clothes ready for her. They're night court clothing, because all the courts like dress a little bit differently. So the night court's kind of like blues and peaches, like, and like belly shirts, like casual, but there's no dresses. Like, she can wear like pants, like it's super comfy down there. And so she goes to find him, and she tells him like, oh, I thought it would always be dark here because it's obviously morning time. And he says like they're a solar court, so day court, or the day, dawn, and night, they still follow the natural laws of like sunrise, sunset. And she's like, well, that's weird because like the spring court, it's always spring. And he says like the seasons are tied to their high lord, so like the seasons always stay that season, which is different, but the solar courts do rotate like a regular day. But like obviously in the night court, their nights are more beautiful than any other night. So she sits down and actually does eat breakfast, and he tells her like he can tell that she's lost weight. And and he's also kind of surprised that she's letting him in her mind so easily. And she asks why, and he's basically like, you have powers now. Like, when you were a human, you didn't have any defenses, but now that you're a Fae, like, you have powers, and you shouldn't just let people. You should try not to let me in your mind, even though like obviously Rhys is super powerful. So if he really wants to get in there, he can. So she asks how often does he get in her mind, and he says he doesn't know. Like he doesn't mean to all the time. Like sometimes she is shouting things kind of down that bond with him, and so he doesn't always have control of it. So she asks why is she there, and he says, this week I want you to learn how to read. And she says, no thank you. And he says, as a High Lord's wife, you'll have to keep up correspondence and make speeches and other things. And he says, you know what? We can also throw in shielding too. Those are necessary skills. But she's like, I don't want you to teach me. And he says, well, what else are you going to do? Paint? I'm like, burn. Ouch. So she's like, why do you care? And he says it serves purposes for him that he's like not disclosing or whatever. And she basically like folds up a fork because she still has like all of this power and she's pissed off. And he tells her like, you're a rather strong High Fae, and asks if she's tested any of her powers. And she's like, I don't have powers. And he's like, you were resurrected by all 7 of the High Lords. You should see, like, did you get any powers from us? And she's like, no, I didn't get anything from you guys. And she's still refusing to learn to read. And he asks, like, is this just out of spite? And she says, or he asks if this is just out of spite of what happened under the mountain. And she's like, don't mention under the mountain, because she just really can't handle talking about it. And so he tells her he can tell someone's coming, and he's like, they have company. And then all of a sudden, what she considers to be his female equivalent enters the room, and we have the most beautiful female Fae, and this is Moore, also known as the Morrigan, and that is Rhysand's cousin. So I don't really feel like they're the female equivalent because they look nothing alike, so I don't know why she said that. But so Moore is like tall, blonde, beautiful, and this is Rhys's cousin, very loosely his cousin. But she comes in and she like Feyre like offers her hand, and Moore hugs her instead, and Feyre like is like, you guys look absolutely nothing alike. And Rhys is like, well, she's the only surviving family I have, so like loosely she's my cousin, but we're not like, you know, first cousins or anything like that. And so Feyre does go ahead and decide to read, only because she thinks about how she literally almost killed herself and Lucien by not being able to read under the mountain. So she decides that she'll let Rhys teach her. So they go to learn how to read, and he basically writes out these lines. And the first thing that he writes is, you look absolutely delicious today, Feyre. So she's like sounding it out. She's like, you look absolutely, like she takes like an hour to sound this out. And he's like, and then she's like, you look absolutely delicious today, Feyre. Like, and then while she's doing that, he gets in her mind and like is telling her to shield at the same time. So he is making her read and shield all at the same time. And so she's pretty exhausted, like pretty quick, but she is able to kick him out of her mind. And she calls him a pig, and he's like, oh, most definitely, but you're reading much higher than I expected. So then he takes her to see this like large map of Prythian that he has, but obviously she can't read it. So like it's not really a danger of anything. And there's some parts of the map that aren't even marked, but she can tell that it's the Night Court. And he asks what she sees, and she says, well, I can see that there's a world split in 2, so like the human realm and the Fae realm. And he asks if she thinks it should remain that way, and she can only think of like her family. And he tells her like they'll be affected if this wall ever comes down, which could happen because there is a war coming. And so Feyre like immediately is like assuming that Rhys is the one wanting to take the wall down. And she's like, please, like, don't invade. And he's like, you really think I'm that much of a monster after everything that happened under the mountain? And he's like, I have absolutely no plans of doing that. And he makes her shield again and gets like, he tries to get her head and makes her shield. And he asks her like, do you think that like Amarantha was the end of everything? And so Feyre starts thinking about how Tamlin hasn't said anything, so why would she think something was going on? But then she's also like, well, Tamlin also doesn't tell me anything, so why would I know if anything was going on? So Rhys tells her about the King of Hybern and how he's been planning for hundreds of years, and like Amarantha was basically just a test. So Amarantha kind of like worked for the King of Hybern and was a 50-year test to see what kind of power and reach he could get. So Prythian is basically all that stands between the King of Hybern and the human world, and he wants to shatter that wall and like start having human slaves again. So Feyre asks when does he plan on doing that, and Rhys says that's why he brought her here. He doesn't know where or when, but he's telling her this because of the connection that Feyre has to Tamlin, and because of Tamlin's connections to Hybern, because Tamlin's family was really close with the King of Hybern, but he wants Tamlin to basically fight with him. Mm-hmm. Also, because Feyre was able to catch a serial, Rhys says he's tried twice and failed. And so, like, if they're able to do that, they might be able to get information. Rhys tells her, like, she's the only one that he can trust because he doesn't think that she'll betray him, even though she says that I can. And Rhys knows that she has powers, even though she's denying it. he says, like, you obviously have strength and speed. He says, you and Tamlin are pretending that you're normal. But he knows that, like, obviously if her and Tamlin have a child, that they'll have a super powerful heir. So why would Tamlin, like, obviously, like, he's going to covet that. And he tells her, like, she could be High Lady one day. So Feyre's obviously like, okay, I just talked to Tamlin about
what
this.
Are you talking about?
Like, there are no High Ladies. And she's like, there are none. And he says, well, there can be. And he tells her, like, you could be able to wield the power of all 7 High Lords at once. And he says, you do have powers, and you need to learn how to master them and control them. She tells him Tamlin won't allow it because he's her High Lord and she's his subject. And Rhys is like, you are no one's subject. You can be a powerful part of this war.
Yes.
We love a feminist. So for the rest of the week, like, Feyre and Rhys separate after this, and pretty much for the rest of that week, Rhys is gone, but he does leave Feyre sentences, and these are some of the sentences that he leaves her to work on. Rhysand is the most handsome High Lord. Rhysand is the most delightful High Lord. Rhysand is the most cunning High Lord. Towards the end of the week, Feyre finds him and Mor having, like, a slight argument because Mor is telling him about an attack that happened on a temple. And she mentions Cassian and Azriel. So we'll learn about them later. But she doesn't give too much information because obviously Feyre comes up. And then Mor winnows out, and Feyre basically asks, like, Rhys what that is. So that's where Feyre really, like, learns about what winnowing is. And Rhys tells her it's, like, basically, like, if you folded a map in half, it's like you touch 2 points of a map and you're basically like, I want to go from here to, like, McDonald's, and, like, boom, you're there. Diagonally. It's like a flu powder. It's like going in the thing. I don't know. So the morning that Feyre is supposed to go home, Rhys asks if she's ready to face the consequences of leaving, and she's just like, that's not any of your business. And he asks if she's considered his offer to help, and he tells her, like, we're not enemies. She says that, well, you're Tamlin's enemy, so that makes you my enemy. But you could free me from this bargain, and then we can see what happens. But he tells her, I can't, and she says, you can't or you won't. But that is the end of their conversation, so he winnows her back to the Spring Court. And as soon as they arrive, Lucien and Tamlin pretty much, like, grab her up. And, like, Tamlin's like, oh my god, you have marks on you, like, looking all over her. And they're in Tamlin's study, and she, like, realizes that Tamlin has, like, destroyed the place. Like, the man has anger issues.
Through a fit.
A hissy fit. And so, Tamlin's basically like, there's not going to be a next time. I'm not letting you go again. Like, damn the consequences. Which, again, if you break a bargain, like, you could essentially, like, die. Or, like, someone. Like, there's no, like, hard and fast rules, but, like, they're very bad consequences. Mm-hmm. But she knows, like, that's empty. We know that Tamlin is all, like, barking no bite. Mm-hmm. So as soon as, like, he's done checking her out, he basically just starts questioning her. Like, him and Lucien spend, like, they don't even ask, like, how are you doing, Feyre? They're basically like, did you see anyone in the night court? Where are all his armies? Like, all these things. And she's pretty appalled that that's, like, the first thing that he wants to do. And they're, like, basically, like, no one ever goes to the night court. And if they do, like, no one ever comes back. So they're basically like, you're our spy. And so she does, like, she basically tells them everything that she talked about with Rhys. And she asks about her powers. And they do say, like, it's true. And they say, like, they don't want people to know about her powers because, like, the other High Lords could kill her because she kind of did steal a piece of their powers. And she mentions that Rhys wants to train her, and Tamlin's like, you don't need to be training. Like, I can protect you. Tamlin, you literally laid there for, like, months while Amaranth tortured her. Like,
right.
What are you going to do, sir? You, like, ugh, okay. And then Tamlin's like, oh, there's not going to be a war. And Lucien is basically like, Lucien kind of asked, like, Feyre, like, do you think Rhys knows everything? And I'm like, yes, we do. So we fast forward to Tithe Day. So again, that's when, like, all the Spring Court people are bringing their tithes that they have to pay. And so Feyre's been sitting there for hours and hours, and this water wraith comes in. It's kind of like a walking fish. I don't really know. And she comes in and she's basically like, I don't have anything. Like, there's no fish left in the pond. And she's like, basically like, I don't even have any food to eat. And so obviously Tamlin's like, I don't give a damn. So, like, you got 3 days. So Feyre's pissed, and she's like, Tamlin, like, we literally have, like, all this money. We don't even need a tithe. And so Feyre chases her out, and she basically gives her some of her jewelry and says, like, you know, like, here, use this and use it to pay your tithe. And so obviously people see her. Tamlin is pissed. And he's like, you know, you undermined me. And Lucien does try to stand up for Feyre, and he's like, it's not the worst thing that can happen. And like Tamlin snaps at Lucien, and Lucien like bows his head or whatever. And so Feyre's pissed, like, what the heck? And Tamlin's like, you know, this is how things are always done. Like, this is how my dad did it, and this is how my son will do it. Like, yada, 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 like, going off. And then when Lucien, like, kind of, like, bows down to Tamlin, Feyre accidentally gets into Lucien's head, which is Rhys's powers. And she, like, basically storms out of dinner. So she, like, runs into Alice, because Alice always, like, gets her ready for bed. And Alice tells her, like, water wraiths basically have, like, a never-ending hunger. And, like, no one ever would have gave a water wraith money. Like, they're greedy, and they don't, like, they recklessly spend, like, their money and stuff. Like, it's pointless to give them money, because, like, they're not going to do right. But she does say, like, they'll never forget what you did for her, which is what the water wraith tell her. Like, she's basically, like, when she gave her the jewelry, she was, like, basically, she was indebted to her and whatever.
So, what I envisioned for the water wraith,
from Harry Potter.
No, Gil Moss from Kim Possible, that one Kim Possible episode.
I know what you're talking about. Let me see. I was gonna say that kind of looks like the things from Harry Potter. You know, like,
I've not watched Harry Potter.
You have to watch the one where they do the cup, whatever, I can't think of what it's called right now. The challenge, and they go like under the water, whatever. Yeah. That they look like they're supposed to be mermaids, but they're like scary mermaids.
Yeah.
That. Oh my god. Yes. But yeah, so Tamlin, But then Feyre goes and apologizes to Tamlin. Like, girl.
There's literally no reason to apologize.
Like, why? Okay, so she goes down to Tamlin, and he's like sitting there, and she apologizes, and he gives her like this new, like, he gives her a gift, and it's a traveling paint kit, and she's like, oh. Because obviously she's not painting. Like, have you not paid any, he doesn't pay any attention to her. And he's like, oh, you don't like it? And like, it just reminds her of like all her PTSD stuff. And she asks, like, can she go like anywhere she wants and paint that? Like, can she go outside? And she tells him, like, he's like, can't you just be happy, like, with what I'm giving you? And she's like, maybe you just need to marry someone that would be happy, like, with how you are being, like, overprotective. And because she's like, I'm not happy with that. And he asks if she wants to marry him, and she says yes, but she's like, I'm literally drowning, like, you're suffocating me. And he freaking explodes, like, his power explodes, and everything in the room shatters. And so, like, the study is destroyed, but Feyre realizes that she's not, and, like, she realizes that she shielded herself with, like, a circle of, like, wind or something. And so, like, Tamlin immediately goes, like, starts begging and crying and pleading, I'm so sorry, and, like, she doesn't do anything, so she just lets him, but he, like, grabs her and holds her, and he's like, I'm sorry, like, you said I was drowning you, and it just made me feel, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, like, the abusive cycle. It's horrible. I hate it. So she hugs him back because, again, they only communicate well physically. And then, like, from there, like, the next few weeks, he kind of, like, lightens the security a little bit. But they're really just, like, going through the motions. So she wakes up one morning and doesn't even realize that it's been, like, a month. And so Rhys is there. He's outside. And she, like, runs to the door, and he's like, you're still losing weight. Because, like, she's still throwing up, not really eating. Like, again, she's just going through the motions. She's miserable here. Tamlin offers him, like, I'll give you anything to break this bargain. And he's like, I have everything I want. Like, there's nothing you could offer me. And so he grabs her, they winnow out, and when they land, like, he tries to get Feyre to play with him, but she just, like, Feyre basically is just like a ghost. Like, she doesn't exist anymore. And so he asks her to come eat with him, and he tells her, like, he felt some fear from her this past month, and she says it was nothing. And he says he mostly doesn't feel anything from her. Like, he has to check the bond sometime and make sure she's still alive. And she doesn't tell him, like, what happened. And he asks if she'll help him, and, like, with the war and everything. She says no. Like, she won't be his pawn. And he basically tells her, like, I was beaten, and, like, he says I was beaten and fucked under the mountain, because he was, like, a sex slave for Amarantha for 50 years, and he doesn't want that to happen again. And then she feels bad, but then she thinks about, like, oh, but Tamlin's trying, like, blah, blah. I hate him. So she, like, goes to bed for, like, a whole day. She doesn't eat dinner, doesn't eat breakfast. And Rhys like comes to her and asks her to read and checks her shield, which she like passes. Like she's like passing with flying colors now. So he just like leaves her, but he does leave her a stack of books. So he comes and checks on her like a day or so, and she's reading, and he brings her food, but like every time she reaches for the food, he uses his powers to like pull the plate away because he tries to get her to like play with him because that's their relationship. And he says like, "Let me help you. Does no one care or like see in the spring court that you're literally fading away?" And he says like, "If you keep this up, Amarantha is winning. Like that is how she wins." And she starts to feel this icy rage and like literally like on her fingertips, and she throws the book at him, which makes him happy because she responded. And then that's kind of the end of that week. And so then she goes back and Tamlin immediately puts all of his security back up. So like we're back to it. So there's an attack somewhere in the spring court, and Feyre's not even allowed to leave the house at this point. So it's basically Feyre and Ianthe in the house. They brought Ianthe back because she left after the failed wedding. And so they bring Ianthe back to keep her like company, but that's pretty much it. And then when Tamlin comes back from whatever the attack is, Ianthe, and Lucien go into a meeting. Like, Ianthe can be in the meeting, but I can't.
Right.
Like, oh, okay. And Feyre, like, is panicking because, like, what the hell? And she, like, balls her hands up in the fist, and she literally starts to grow claws, which Lucien notices, and he's like, follow me. So he, like, asks, like, how long have you been, like, manifesting these powers? And he says, like, look, I'm gonna ask Tamlin about training. But she's like, she knows like in her head, like this is pointless. So she hears like the three of them arguing, and Ianthe says like, look, they're gonna kill her or they'll take her and breed her, which that's a true fear. I can understand that. But like they're like basically the other High Lords might like take her and like have kids with her to like breed for their power. But all the more reason for her to have training.
Right.
Like let's
to
have
be
her
able to defend herself. Yeah.
Like okay. And Tamlin's like, so Tamlin obviously is like, no, I'll listen to Ianthe and not Lucien. Okay. So, she sees Tamlin and Lucien leaving again, and they are armed. And I'm like, finally, getting to the good part. So, he tells her there was an attack on, like, the east side of the court, and that's the side close to Highburn. And she's like, okay, can I come? And he's like, no. And don't even think about following me. And she's like, please. And he's like, no, you're untrained. And I'm like, well, whose fault is that? So he says, like, you can't even sleep through the night. And she's like, neither can you, beast man. And so she's like, I'm coming. And he says no. And so she goes to follow him out the door and, like, runs smack dab into this invisible barrier. He locked her in the house. And Lucien tells her, like, he shielded the whole house. And so, like, only Feyre can't leave. Everyone else can, like, walk in and out of the house. It's just Feyre. And so she is, like, boiling over. And so she feels, like, this burning like power, and her engagement ring literally melts off of her hand, and like she goes to a window and she's like trying to like get out. It's like the window shut, and like she literally like has this like blackout of power. She can't see, and so she hears a female voice and someone picks her up, and she starts like thrashing, and she hears Alice go like, please take care of her. And the female voice is like, consider yourself lucky that your High Lord wasn't here. And she realizes it's Moore. And Moore tells her, like, Rhys shattered the shield super easily, and she takes her into a cave, which makes her panic more because she thinks, like, oh, we're going under the mountain. But they're just, like, it's very quick. And then she hears, like, Rhys, like, talking, like, kind of in, like, a growl voice. And Moore's like, I did everything by the book. Like, calm your panties. And so she hands, like, Feyre over to Rhys. And Rhysand says, we're done here. And they went out. And I was like, yes! Yay! We're gone! We're done with the spring court. Ooh, yes. Ooh. Okay. So she wakes up, and like Rhys is like sitting there, and his like eyes are like ice cold, like he's pissed. And Rhys tells her that like, you were screaming, you wrapped yourself in darkness, which also is Rhys's power. So like the people in the house couldn't even see her anymore, and he couldn't come in and get her because of the laws, but he smashed the shield so that like Moore could go in. And he says like, if he would have went in and got her, then Tamlin would have had the right to come back and get her from the night court, so that's why he sent Moore. And she thinks like maybe Tamlin will be able to heal, but she knows like, I don't want to go back there. And she asks if like she got the darkness from him, and he says yes. And she asks, what powers did I get from others? And like she knows obviously ice is from the winter court, wind is probably from the day court. He tells her winnowing can be anybody, you just have to like train to develop that. And like she tries and she can't do that. She tried it like somewhere else. She can't winnow just yet. But Rhys like is gonna go leave, and they're still in like that moon palace, and she's like, "Please do not leave me. Like, can I go with you?" And he tells her like, "Okay." Like he knows like all the other times that she's told Tamlin about the like he knew that was gonna happen, but he tells her like, "If you leave this place with me and go with me into the actual night court, you absolutely can never tell anybody what you see, who you see, what you hear." And she agrees because he's like, "My people will die," and so she agrees, and she asks where they're going, and he says, "To Valaris, the city of starlight." I'm so excited. And so we go to part 2, which I did not even write down what part 3 was called, but this is part 2. There's 3 parts to this book. I don't know what part 1 is called either. I know part 2 is called The House of Wind. So he takes her to the townhouse. So Rhys has like, I mean, he's rich. He's the High Lord. He's got houses. So she goes with him to the townhouse, and he says that that's his family home. And I put Cassie and Azriel. So he tells her no one can winnow into this house and that she's safe. It's like in the city, like it's like just right amongst the common folk. And he tells her like about his friends. So basically she goes to the townhouse, and she doesn't meet his friends right away, but she can hear them because they're like beating down the door. And it's Cassie and Azriel, and she hears a strange female voice, which is Amren, we will learn. And more also ends up coming, but they're all like outside the door. And Cassian's like, "We're hungry for breakfast." And so Feyre's like, "How does this place exist?" Because this is also not the night court she expected. Like, she sees like a city, like a normal city town. Again, no screaming, no bloody bodies, no abuse, no torture. And she's like, "How does Valaris exist when Amarantha was around?" And Rhys tells her, like, "We kept it a secret, and Rhys was shielding it." And as they go to leave, she sees the House of Wind, and that's like a big kind of like the Moon Palace across town, and asked Rhys like, "Why did you keep this place hidden and didn't like bring people here to save them during Amarantha?" Which this pissed me off because I was like, Feyre, like, go easy on Rhys. Which I mean,
Right.
obviously I'm a Rhys apologist, but like he did what he like. Everybody's responsible for their court. Like,
Right.
why does Rhys have to be responsible for everybody else? I'm not mad at him for what he did. So whatever. So
he did what he had to do to make sure his people were safe.
Yeah, because obviously everybody else was dying. Like, okay, otherwise I think they all just would have been dead. Like, I don't think he could have. I don't think there would have been any benefit if he had done that.
Right.
And he says like no one knows of Valaris and no one ever has. And so like he walks her through town. And she sees shops and there's like artist people and music and restaurants. Like, it's a cozy little town. And if you're on TikTok, like there's like a place in Switzerland, I think, that people like basically say like this is Valaris. Like, it's like in like the like valley of like mountains, and like it lights up. It's so cute, and I'm like, oh, that's so cute. So you should look it up. But they walk through town, and he tells her like he wants to have dinner at the House of Wind with the Inner Circle. And he kind of tells her about the Inner Circle. So Amren is his second in command, and she looks like High Fae, but she's not. So she's similar to Feyre in that the fact that she's not High Fae, but she's not made like Feyre was. Amren is just something else, and no one knows what she is. Moore is actually his third in command, which Feyre surprised. Like, she thought like Cassie and Azriel, like the men, would be like his 1 and 2, but they're not. And Rhys like admits like he's actually afraid of Amren, like in her power. Like, he's like, I don't go there with Amren. And Feyre's like, just during this day, like she starts thinking to herself like how she would be happy just to die, and obviously Rhys is in her head, and he like grabs her and tells her like never think that, and she slips in his mind and like gets a glimpse of how terrible she looks, and he asks like, how did you get past my shield? And who else had she done that to? And she tells him about like how she got in Lucian's head that time. And he basically tells her like that these mind powers she has are called Daemati powers. And that there's other Fae that just have these kind of powers. So she has to be careful, like, because there's other people outside of them two, that can get into each other's minds. So we learn a little bit about like the Inner Circle. They basically go to the House of Wind and have this dinner. We don't learn about a lot about the House of Wind in this book. You learn about it more in later books, but it's basically like another home. They can't winnow into the House of Wind either, so like they can winnow close to it, and then Rhys has to like fly, or like Cassian or Azriel have to fly as well. So again, so we have Amren. I just want to recap. So we have Amren. She looks High Fae, but she's not. Moore is High Fae, and she is Rhys's kind of cousin. And we'll learn later, but her dad is like over the like the night court that everybody thinks is the whole night. They call it the Court of Nightmares. And that's what's actually under the mountain that Amarantha modeled. Then we have Cassian, who is the general of Rhys's armies. And we have Azriel, who is what we call a spy master. And Cassian and Azriel are Illyrian warriors. So Rhys is... Illyrians are like... For the lack of a better word, they're like an ethnicity of Fae. I don't know. And so, like, Rhys is actually part Illyrian and part Fae. Even though Illyrians are Fae, it's kind of weird. And so that's why Rhys can grow wings, but he doesn't have them all the time. But Cassian and Azriel always have wings, so they can fly. Cassian cannot winnow, but Azriel can because he's a little bit different. Mor can winnow. Amren cannot winnow. So just a little bit about each of them. So at the dinner, like, Feyre kind of learns a little bit about each of them. Azriel is like described as like the most beautiful of them all. He's like truly like just a beautiful man. But he has scarred hands, which she'll learn about later. Him and Cassian wear these things called siphons. So they're basically look like jewels that are like, they have 7 of them each. And they basically help them like control their powers. So Illyrians have a lot of power, and normally like most Illyrians only have like 1 or 2, but they are so strong, Cassian and Azriel, that they have 7. Like they are literally the strongest Illyrians to ever exist. And also they're like all the Illyrians hate them because they're like half-breeds and like were looked down upon. So they kind of like it's nice. It's nice that they are like that. But they wear these siphons. So Azriel's are blue and Cassian's are red. Also, Cassian is kind of like, I always describe him as in my mind as like a himbo. Like he's like kind of like funny. And then Azriel is like very like secluded. He's very troubled, broody, sad, lovely man. And so they have this dinner and they basically share a lot of stories. We learn about Miriam. So Miriam is the only other human turned Fae. Miriam, well, she was half human, half Fae. Yes. She was born to a human slave that was impregnated by a Fae. And she was given a long life, not turned Fae. So she's the only one that's kind of similar to Feyre. And back like when they had this big war like centuries ago that like Rhys and them all had when the wall went up, she was kind of a part of that. We learned that Amren, again, she's different. She does not eat. She drinks blood of animals, not humans. And very interesting, at the dinner, Amren sniffs Feyre. Why do you think that is?
Ooh, I don't know.
I'm gonna come back to it. But she like sniffs her, and I put LOL because I have a thought. But yeah, and then we learn more about the Illyrians. So the Illyrians are pretty much brutes. They're very misogynistic. They're like just like big burly men that like beat on each other and whatever. They're warriors, but like they're horrible to their women. All of the like female Illyrians, they also have wings, but they used to like clip their wings. And we learned that, so again, Rhys is half Illyrian, and his mom was the Illyrian, and his mom like loved to fly, and so basically as soon as they have their periods, they will clip their wings and like get them married off or whatever. So for whatever reason, Rhys's dad, who was the High Lord, like he flew in wherever Rhys's mom was. This is before that she was his mom, and happened to see like her family trying to like hold her down and clip her wings. And as soon as he like landed, their mating bond snapped into place. So he stopped them from like clipping his mom's wings. So when Rhys was growing up, he was able to like fly with his mom. But like during that time, which Rhys is like 500 years old, they used to like clip all of the female wings, but Rhys has now banned that, so that they're not allowed to do that.
Good for him,
anymore.
as he should.
Yes, such a feminist. We stand a feminist king. Yeah, that's kind of like how Rhys's mom and dad like met, even though like they didn't like love each other. Rhys's dad was not like the greatest guy ever, but they did have like a mating bond, so they were meant to be together. We also learn like the backstory of how the Bat Boys, as we call them, so Rhys, Azriel, and Cassian got together. So Cassian's mom was basically like, she got pregnant by someone, he doesn't know who his dad was, and she was kind of like, I don't know if she was like a prostitute or something, but like that's kind of how they make it seem. And so he was dumped in the Illyrian camps when he was like 8, and he was poor, and like so he used to like beat up people and steal their clothes. And then Rhys, because he's half Illyrian, his dad was like, okay, like you're gonna learn the way of the Illyrians. His dad made him go to like the camps. His mom was like, okay, like I'm gonna like have a house nearby, so I'm here if you need me, but she didn't like baby him. So when Rhys got there, Cassian was like trying to beat him up and steal his clothes. So they had like this like love-hate relationship. And so like they fought or whatever, but then after that, Rhys felt bad for Cassian being out in the cold, so his mom like had him invite him into the house, and like so they kind of became brothers. And then Azriel, his parents sucked so bad. Like his dad was like kind of like a high person or whatever, and I want to say his mom was a mistress. And then his step, I don't know, somehow he was like held in like the like dungeons of his like dad's house for years, and his brothers would like, the reason his hands are scarred is because they knew that he healed fast, so his brothers would like burn his hands with oil and he would heal, and so now he has all these scars. And then after they did all that torture to him, they threw him in the Illyrian camps, and so like Rhys and Cassian took them under his wing, and they kind of like bullied him, and then like all became friends the same way too. So like as they were coming up, obviously the three of them were like super powerful. And so then Rhys's dad was like super envious of them and separated them. So for a short time, Azriel actually worked for Rhys's dad before he died and was like his spy master. So on top of Azriel being a Illyrian fighter like Cassian, he has shadows. He's a shadow singer. So literally he can like blend in the shadows. He has like shadows that, like literally Xaden. I don't know. Like he's the original shadow singer though. Xaden came later, but he literally has shadows like around him, and like he has like spies and like Nuala and Caradin, which we saw them in ACOTAR too. They are like kind of like Rhys's servants or whatever, but they're race also, but they can like, they're kind of like shadowy too, like they kind of work for Azriel. He always has like spies and stuff, and he can like be anywhere. He's like always off on missions and stuff, so like that's what Azriel kind of does. So just kind of like covering the inner
just
circle.
Think Shadow Daddy Deluxe.
Yeah, he's Shadow Daddy Deluxe. Xaden is Shadow Daddy, but Azriel is Shadow Daddy Deluxe. So that's kind of the backstory. So we also like learn like the history of the Night Court is that obviously it was super vicious, but actually when Valaris was established, like whoever the High Lord was at that time, he really wanted to change like the narrative of it. So he did, but like they kept it a big secret because like on the outside they want people to think that. They don't want people coming in there and knowing, so they keep it like, they keep that image. And so Valaris is considered the Court of Dreams, but under that mountain where like Feyre like the Moon Palace was, that is considered the Court of Nightmares. And that's where Mor's dad is kind of like in charge of. His name is Kier, and we meet him later. But that is where they do like all the terrible stuff at. That does really happen, but it's honestly it's probably like 5% of what the Night Court truly is, and Rhys only goes there when he has to. So after like Feyre learns like all this history and stuff, she accepts Rhys's offer to help with the war, and he wants to start training tomorrow. He also tells them that Hybern has resurrected Jurian. So in ACOTAR, when Amarantha was around, she had 2 pieces of Jurian. She wore his finger bone as a necklace, and she had a ring with his eyeball. So that disappeared when she was killed. Obviously, some of her cronies, probably the Adder, took it to the King of Hybern, and because the King of Hybern has the Cauldron, which we'll learn more about the Cauldron here, he has resurrected Jurian. Again, Jurian was a human who killed Amarantha's sister, so Amarantha killed him. so much history. Gosh, this is why this episode's long. Okay, so where am I at? So Amren tells Rhys that he should go to the prison in the Night Court. Well, it's kind of like in the Night Court, but go to the prison and talk to the Bone Carver to learn how they resurrected Jurian, because like, how did you do that? And Amren says like she won't set a foot in there, and Azriel volunteers to go, but they say like Rhys should take Feyre because the Bone Carver will be interested in Feyre. So we also learned that Amren was, because she is not truly Fae, Amren was incarcerated in the prison like a millennia ago. Like we don't even know how long Amren, or how old Amren is, like, but she will not go there because she was there once and she will never go back. So Rhys tells Feyre a little bit more about like keeping Valaris hidden. So he tells her like when he was under the mountain with Amarantha, he used whatever was left of his power to made people see Valaris like as a barren rock, and he made anyone who had ever been to the Night Court, he basically wiped their minds of it and made them forget about it. And he just like deals with the consequences. Like obviously he feels bad that like his people were protected, but at the same time he doesn't. Like he did what he was supposed to do as their High Lord. So that night, she does have a nightmare, and she ends up burning her bed, but she realizes that power is from the Autumn Court. So that is from Lucian's dad, which is his name is Baron. And Rhys comes in and kind of wakes her from that, and he tells her that he has nightmares also, which is so much better than Tamlin, who pretended that he wasn't having trauma, whereas Rhys actually can relate to Feyre and admit, like, I also have PTSD. Rhys also tells her that he sent a request to visit the Summer Court, and the next day they do try to go to the prison. But they go to the prison, and the prison is basically like a giant mountain, and it's also under the mountain. So, of course, when they get there, Feyre cannot go in. So, they try, and it doesn't happen. So, Feyre goes home. She feels like a complete loser because she couldn't go in. And Amren brings her, like, a necklace, and Amren's like, here, this is what helped me escape. So, Rhys is like, like, Amren gave you that? And so, they go to the prison again. So, they go in, and Feyre kind of like ask about the prison, and we learn like the prison really like kind of rules us. Like there's no guards, right? Like there are, but they're not. Like they're not just like out. It's like a very creepy. Like they don't even have like doors on everything. Like they're not locked. It's a very strange place. And Rhys says like it's under Rhys's jurisdiction only like because of where it's located, but it really has its own laws. And they are going to see the Bone Carver, and the Bone Carver he's also like an entity. And he appears to you as different things. So when Feyre sees him, he appears to her as like a young boy, about like 8 years old, with raven dark hair. And he appears to Rhys, we later learn, as Jurian. And so when they go see the Bone Carver, he asks Feyre, like, he wants questions from her. So he asks, like, where did she go when she died? And she says, like, she said it felt like she was going home. And Rhys asked about the cauldron and about the temples being attacked, and the Bone Carver basically says that the cauldron, basically, like, you guys know what a cauldron looks like. So basically, long ago, the cauldron was broken, and they like took the feet off of it, and the feet were hidden at temples, which explains like why all these temples are being attacked. And the cauldron could be used to shatter the wall. He also tells them about what's called the Book of Breathings, and it holds spells to control the cauldron, but it was split in two because like it's just extremely powerful. And the Fae have one half, and the human queens have another half. So there's a group of 6 human queens in the human realm. And the High Lord of Summer is who has the Fae half, which is why Rhys put in a request to go to the Summer Court. But like High Lords can't just like pop up in other people's courts. And so we also learned that the human half has to be given like willingly. So if they try any kind of like mind games, anything, like it literally, the book is like, okay, if you've ever seen The Mummy, think of like the book, they literally have the key, like that metal book. Like that's what I was picturing. Like I was like, I don't know what else to think. This is literally what that book is. So basically, if they try any kind of games, like the book will literally like melt. I was like, think of The Mummy.
I love all your references.
I hope that everyone can visualize what I'm saying today.
And if not, look it up.
And so, yeah, so they like, basically they have to like get the queens to give them this book. I was like, think of The Mummy when she had like the book of, I don't think of what it's called. I'm not gonna butcher it. So they leave the prison and they go back and talk to more Azriel and Cassian about the Bone Carver. And Rhys, oh gosh, this part's so funny. Rhys tells Feyre he wants to, like, before they start working on stuff, he wants to test out her powers by sending her to the Weaver.
Oh, Lord.
And everyone's like freaking out, like, Rhys, absolutely not. And Feyre's like, what? Like, what? Like a Weaver? Like, that's not that bad. Rhys also is like, I'm gonna make you the human adversary because you were human, like you could talk to them, and they need to go talk to the queen. So he like is gonna make her that. And so he gets her ready to go to the Weaver, and we're going to learn about her in a second. He's getting her dressed with all these knives, and he gets down on his knees, which is interesting. Just want to point that out. And he basically tells her, like, so the Weaver basically lives in a cottage in this, like, wooded area that's not under the control of any of the High Lords. All kinds of, like, very scary, vicious beasts live there, because Rhys says, like, he used to try to trick Amarantha to go there all the time, but even she, like, would not fall for it, because he was hoping she would go and, like, get herself killed, but she would. So he's like, basically there's something that belongs to him in there, and he doesn't tell her what, but he believes that because Feyre was made by all of the High Lords, that she basically can, like, sense things that belong to them. And he says he can't go there because, like, the Weaver will know him and, like, sense him, so, like, he can't go. And also just because he can't even go, like, talk to her, because the High Lords are not allowed to, like, intervene with her. Like, she just, like, does her own stuff. And he said that, like, basically Feyre will be invisible to her as long as she only touches the object that she's supposed to. But, like, the Weaver is lethal, so, like, be careful. And he tells her, "You are my salvation, Feyre." So they're in the woods, they're walking up, and Rhys, like, so what Rhys and Feyre do is they always have, like, sexual banter. Like, that's how they distract each other. And so Rhys is basically like, "Oh, you could sleep with Cassian, like, if you want to, like, basically to get over Tamlin." And like, he's like, he'd be willing. And Feyre's like, "Okay, like, tell him to come to my room tonight." But anyway, so they see the cabin, and Feyre was like, it's literally, like, it's basically like a spider web. Like, it's meant to draw you in. It's basically like a little simple, like, whitewashed cabin, and she very welcoming, and she can hear, like, someone, like, singing a tune. Now, when you listen to the words of the tune, like, it's very morbid, very scary. But she can see a woman with, like, she's young but, like, old feeling at the same time, with, like, long dark hair, and she's, like, spinning thread and singing a creepy song, and Rhys is like, "Gotta go." So she, like, heads in, and, like, as she heads in, like, the lady just keeps doing her thing or whatever. So she's like, she starts to, first she doesn't feel anything, and then she kind of feels, like, almost like a tap on the shoulder, and she basically turns and she sees a sapphire ring, like, on the third shelf of, like, a bookshelf or something. And as soon as she grabs it, the Weaver stops singing, and she runs and, like, almost gets it to the door, and the door, like, slams shut. And she's like, "Who's in my house?" Ah! Oh my god! Oh my god!
It's so, and with this, I imagine, like, Hansel and Gretel, and
yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was like, it was such a trap. And she's, like, trying to get the window open, like, nothing is open. So she's like, "Someone's in my house." And so, like, this lady, like, starts attacking her. So the Weaver is blind, but she has, like, long claw nails and, like, nasty teeth. And so, like, Feyre's like running, and she's, like, trying to get out, and she's like, so the only way out of here is the chimney. So Feyre starts, like, climbing up this chimney, and she's like, it smells like burnt fat and, like, burned hair, and she realized, like, this lady's been, like, cooking people. And so she's going up the chimney, and she's like, she's stuck because it's, like, cramped. And so, like, the Weaver is like, oh my, I can just, like, see it in my brain.
Yeah, and I was like, this is horrific.
I know, I have goosebumps. I can just, like, see her, like, looking up. Oh my gosh! With, like, long nails. And so she's, like, trying to get her. And so, like, Feyre's like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna die. Like, I'm about to just die." And then, like, in her mind, she's like, "Calm down," which I think was probably Rhys talking to her. But she's like, "Okay, I got this." So she, like, "You're a fae, girl. Use your power." So she, like, slams into, like, the chimney, like, knocks a brick loose, slams it into the Weaver's face, and then she, like flies up out of the top of it. And then, like, the Weaver, like, flies out the front door, and she's like, "Where are you? Like, where are you?" And so Feyre's, like, running through these trees, right? So she runs her a little bit, and then Rhys is literally, like, lounging on a branch, picking his nails, and he's like, "What?" And she's like, "What the So he, like, grabs her, and then, like, they, like, winnow out of there. So he, like, winnows them back to the inner circle, and she's literally covered in, like, human fat and hair. It's disgusting. Which he, like, can magically, like, clean you. You don't feel clean, but you look clean. So he does that for her. And she basically tells him everything. And we learn that the ring was actually his mother's ring, and his mother gave it to the Weaver on purpose for safekeeping, which we'll learn about later. And Feyre, like, is like, "Okay, I have to train. Like, I cannot be weak like this anymore. I literally just almost died in a chimney. So, like, I have to." And so he takes her so she can, like, get in the bath, and they start to talk about Ianthe, and she asks Rhys, like, why she, because at this point I don't think Feyre dislikes Ianthe yet, and so she asks Rhys like why he doesn't like Ianthe, and he says that priestesses are not what they promise to be, and he doesn't trust Ianthe because also when Amarantha happened, somehow Ianthe's family like managed to get out and like they just ran away and hid for 50 years. Like they didn't try to help or do anything either. And he tells Feyre like, I want to train your powers and all these things. And so he starts talking about Ianthe some more, and he tells her that Ianthe tried to seduce him like years and years ago. And he basically shows her like what happened. So he like lets Feyre get in his mind. So basically like this is after the war. I don't know. It was like years ago, before Amarantha. He like came to his room and Ianthe was like basically like butt naked on his bed and was like, I know you want to be like, we should be together. Like we could have a powerful heir. And he's like, please get the hell out of my room. And she like comes up and like tries to like rub on him, and he literally like crushed her hand. Not even with his powers, because most powerful High Lord. And he told her to leave his court and don't touch him or anyone in his court ever again. And so that makes like Feyre realize like that's probably why Lucien, because she's probably doing that to Lucien. We skip ahead a little bit, and Feyre's having a conversation with Mor about female Fae just in general, and Mor's telling Feyre about how female Fae are kind of sold off as well to their suitor when they essentially have their periods and basically for their virginity as well. And she basically tells her, like, she doesn't tell her the whole story, but Cassian and Rhys kind of saved Mor. Yeah, like that. We'll learn more about Mor's backstory, but basically Rhys was High Lord when I think Mor came to age or whatever. I don't know. That's kind of, no, I don't think he was. He couldn't have been, because Mor was in the war. She's old. Yeah, I don't think he was. But essentially, like, Mor tried everything to like not get her period, like, basically. But like Mor is so powerful, like it literally like shook the mountains and everything. So they knew. And so Mor was promised to Eris, who is Lucien's older brother, the oldest brother of the oldest son of the Autumn Court. I can't speak. And so I'll just tell this now because I don't know, it comes up later. So Rhys basically like snuck her out and took her to one of the Illyrian camps, which happened to be where Cassian and Azriel were. And then Rhys and Azriel went somewhere. So that night, Mor was like, I'm taking this into my own hands. And she slept with Cassian, who not only did she like give her virginity away, but Cassian is like a lowborn dog, as they call him. And so what happens is her family, so Keir, her dad, and the rest of her family literally beat the hell out of her. And they literally nail a note to her womb and like drop her off in the Autumn Court and are like, Eris, she's your problem. And then Eris was like, no, she's not my problem, and leaves her there. And then like Azriel basically ended up finding her. And that's kind of how she got out of it, but I mean, that's an ordeal to get out of it. Yeah. So yeah. So pretty crappy. But she's telling her this as they're kind of preparing to go to the human world, but Mor isn't going to go on this trip. So they all go to the human world. They actually go to Feyre's home, which is where Elaine and Nesta are. Her dad's like on the continent, so like essentially wherever they are is like an island, and there's like a separate continent, and that's where their dad is. We learn Elaine is engaged, and she's very welcoming, but Nesta's a bitch as usual. And we learn that their father does know of a threat above the wall. Like, he knows something's going on as well. And Feyre tells them like she's been remade and tells them everything that happens, and she wants the house to be a meeting ground for the queens and the High Fae. And Nesta's like, no. And Elaine, like, we learned that not only is she engaged, but she has like a iron engagement ring, which we know, like, even though iron doesn't do anything, they believe, like, the humans believe that it has powers against the Fae. And her fiance's family like hunt Fae, like they hate them. But Elaine says that, you know, they should help Feyre because of all the things that Feyre's done with them. And I was like, facts. Yeah, you owe Feyre. Yeah, you definitely owe her. So Feyre brings in the bad boys. And they sit down to eat dinner, and obviously, like, we learned even in ACOTAR, like, their food's just not as good as the Fae food. And so of course Nesta's pissy because she's like, oh, our food's not good enough. Nesta, chill out, okay? It's unnecessary. And Cassian loves Nesta, by the way. Like, he loves a little challenge. Nesta's like, what are you looking at? And he says, someone who let her little sister risk her life all the time.
Ooh.
Ate her up. Ate her up. Elaine also mentions Claire, and I was like, ouch, that hurts. For Rhys and Feyre, that hurts. But basically, like, they talk about the thing with the queens, and they all agree, and so they're gonna stay the night. And Feyre and Rhys end up sharing a room, but they do not share a bed. God, close. Forced proximity, not one bed. And so Rhys says that Elaine should not marry the Lord's son. And Feyre starts picking back a little bit and is like talking about how Azriel pines after more. And Rhys is like, you should mind your business. Rhys also admits how pissed he is at her sisters for how they used to treat her, which, like, facts. Like,
yeah.
Feyre moved on from that entirely too fast for me because, especially from Elaine, because it's easy to not like Nesta because she makes it, but, like, Elaine's so, like, like, yeah. Elaine, like, slides into the little sister role, but she's not the little sister. Right. You're not. So you're just as guilty, and I agree with Rhys. And Tamlin either, because Tamlin feels the same way, and that's the only, like, kudos that Tamlin gets. He also lets Feyre know that she is getting paid as a member of his inner circle, and he asks, like, when her birthday is, and she says winter solstice, and he's like, okay, well, why didn't you celebrate it? But she didn't want to. So the next day he takes her to train, and they're, like, out, like, in the middle of nowhere, and she's like, she wants to work alone, so he tells her to shout at the tattoo, and she's like, seriously, like, that's all I gotta do? And he's like, yeah, you can rub it on certain body parts and I'll come faster. Him so much. So she tries winnowing and, like, different powers, and nothing happens, and Rhys starts, like, sending her notes, which I love this part of, like, this in the book. So they send notes throughout the book, and, like, he sends her, like, a pen and paper, and then, like, it'll vanish and come back. So Rhys is sending her notes back and forth, and then she gets distracted, and the freaking adder sneaks up on her and grabs her. But Rhys quickly appears, and we learn it was a trap for the adder. And the adder says he was sent by the king for Feyre and doesn't know, like, what the plans are or whatever, but there are large armies waiting, and I was like, Daddy Azzy shows up. So Azriel comes because he's also, like, the torture master. Of course he is. And so he comes and gets the adder, and he goes. And Feyre is pissed because she's like, I was bait and you didn't tell me. And Rhys is like, I do it again. I do it again. But she tries to hit him, but he winnows. So then Feyre is, like, pissed, though. So she finally gets angry enough that she winnows and tackles him, too. So they go back to Valaris, and like, Rhys basically, like, Azriel shares, like, his mind with Rhys to, like, show what happened with the interrogation with the adder. But he doesn't kill the adder, so the adder does get released. And basically someone had told the king that Feyre had been there. Rhys does let her in his mind to see, like, the same conversation. And also we learned that Tamlin has shut down his borders. She decides to write Tamlin a letter and just is like, I'm not coming back. Like, I appreciate everything. Just let me go. Kudos, whatever. She also asks Rhys if she can see the city at night. And so the inner circle is going to have a night out. And Amren comes to her room, and we learn that Azriel has spies on Amren because he does not trust her. And Feyre asks Amren about tithing there, and we learn that they don't do that in the Night Court, because they shouldn't do it anywhere.
Right.
Like, they have enough money. And so Feyre returns the necklace to Amren, and we learn that the necklace had absolutely no power. She just told her that. Like,
I love Amren.
Yeah, it was a placebo. After dinner that night, Cassian, Azriel, and Mor go to Rita's, which, like, that's, like, their bar. Like, that's where they go out. And Rhys and Feyre go home. And then that night, Rhys and Feyre send notes back and forth in bed. And, like, basically, he asks her, like, to lick his wounds. Literally. So Feyre starts training with Cassian, and he asks about Tamlin, and she basically gets so upset that she literally burns through, like, the fighting pads. And then she, like, breaks down, and Rhys has her, like, summon darkness, and he talks to her, like, about different types of darkness, like how it can be calming and all these things, and he's just working with her powers. And then we learn that Rhys, Amren, and Feyre are going to be going to the summer court, but Cassian cannot go because the last time that Cassian was in the summer court, he demolished a building. So he can't go. So they go to the summer court, and we meet Tarquin. He is the High Lord of the summer court, and he's actually pretty young. He's only like 80 years old. He was under the mountain as well, and he actually was the guy that Rhys kind of saved. So there was a guy that got caught under the mountain trying to, like, escape, and Amarantha wanted Rhys to like read his mind, but instead Rhys like just killed him and wiped his mind because he knew if he did, it probably would have exposed Tarquin. So he's like pretty thankful for that. We also meet Varian and Cressida, which are kind of like, I think they're Tarquin's cousins or something like that. And basically, Rhys and Feyre spend like the next couple of days being super jealous of each other because Rhys really does not like Cressida, but he's like just flirting with her to like get by. And Feyre's flirting with Tarquin because she does think to herself like, oh, he could be like, he could be a nice guy, but it's not like the passion that she wants. But obviously, like, Rhys gets upset like seeing her flirt. And Feyre's like, maybe I should just sleep with Tarquin to get like the book or whatever, the book of breathings from him. And she starts using her water power because of course she gets that from the summer court, and the closer she is to them, like the more her power is developing there. Tarquin does like, he obviously kind of does like, all these high lords like Feyre, so he takes her like on private lunches, and he takes her like to their family jewels room and like tries to give her a necklace and just all these things. And even like Rhys and Feyre can tell like Tarquin really kind of wants to be their friend. He even says like he doesn't think that Rhys is evil. And Feyre tells Rhys like, why don't you just ask him for the book? But Rhys thinks like he doesn't want a lot of people. I mean, obviously Rhys moves alone. Like he has the inner circle, but he doesn't move like that. So like that would just probably never work.
It's hard for him to trust people.
Yeah, like he has his people, and that's, you know, you can't have everybody knowing things. And Rhys does admit to Feyre that he is jealous just about like how easy it is for Tarquin, and just like he does admit like it is hard always being the bad guy. Like he has no qualms about filling that role, but it does get hard like on him, and just like always having to worry about people running from him, like a woman like being afraid of his powers or like him scaring them off. And Feyre just thinks about like how they truly are like a representation of the Court of Dreams. And this is where we get, Feyre says to him, to the people who look at the stars and wish. And then he says to her, to the stars who listen and the dreams that are answered. And I love that. So Feyre starts practicing these little like water animals that we see come back later in the book. And they have another dinner with Tarquin, and she's able to like trick him into letting her in his mind by like kind of like making herself appear as him because she has part of his powers. So she gets in his mind, and she basically is able to figure out where the book is, and it's basically like off of this little like island thing that is only visible a couple hours of the day because of the tide. So the three of them basically plan to do that the next night, and so they're gonna do that. So when they go and get this book, Rhys basically drops Amber and Feyre on the island because they can't winnow in, and he goes to like be the watchdog. So Feyre can literally feel it, and she feels like it's beneath them. So her and Amber have to like dig through all this sand, and they hit a lead door. So then she like uses her like hand, and she literally shapeshifts kind of into Tarquin and gets the door to open. And then there's like stairs. They go down the stairs into like all this water, and like Amber's like, I don't feel like, it just is super easy. Like she doesn't feel anything. So they go down, and they go through another door, and like the book's in there, and the book basically like talks to Feyre, like it's like, who are you? Like it's super creepy.
Yeah.
And it's like, come closer. So like when she gets the book, the tide starts to come in, and Amber knows like even as she's getting like the tide is starting to come in, so like she's like, Feyre, like hurry up, like come on. And so when she finally gets it, like she grabs it, and the door literally like slams shut. So Amren's like using her powers, and she's able to get the door open. And so they get out into like the little stairwell, but that just makes the door slam shut again. So that makes the stairwell literally fill up again. And Amren's trying to use her powers, but it's like her powers are like subdued down there. So they're literally like about to drown. All of a sudden, the door on the outside like flies open, and there's a bunch of water wraiths, and they come in, and like they swim super fast. So they like swim them out, and they like drop them on the like beach basically, and they're like, our sister's debt is paid. So because Feyre gave that water wraith her jewelry at the tide of the spring court, they basically owed a debt, and they saved them. Rhys appears because he was basically flying overhead, and he's like, you guys set off every alarm in the summer court. And he was like knocking people out, and he even says this later. He's like, I don't know why I didn't use my mind powers. Like, why are you physically doing any activities? Like, you have all this power. Why are you physically knocking people out? So he grabs them, and they winnow out and takes them back to the night court, to the townhouse, and like Cassian, Azriel, and Moore are there. And Rhys has to have Feyre open the book because it's like spelled by Tarquin's powers. And everyone's like, ooh, like it just like it weirds everybody out. And the book calls Feyre because she's like, I am Tarquin, I am Summer, and then the book's like, you're a liar. And it's like she's like open, and it's like say please. And so it does open. And this is where I put think the Mummy book. And it literally like the book is like carved in metal, and it's like a really old language. And Rhys basically says like he took a gamble on the fact that he assumed Amren would be able to read this book, and he thinks it also might hold a spell to free Amren, because again, Amren is not Fae. She's just in like a Fae body, so it might be able to like free her from this Fae form. So Amren takes the book back to her house, which we learn Amren has like an apartment or something somewhere else. And there's a box the next day on the counter. So we learn that the Summer Court marked them as traitors and thieves. And basically when the Summer Court does that, they send blood rubies. So they sent 3 blood rubies to mark them. And Rhys admits like he really did want to like ask Tarquin, but he just couldn't trust him. And he thinks like Tarquin probably really would have been their friend, but you know, he just had to do what he had to do. And Rhys does admit, like, this is where he admits, like, he shouldn't have been trying to fight the guards. He should have just wiped their minds. And so Feyre tries to, like, soften him and says, like, you know, I can move out, like, if you want. Like, just tries to, like, play with him. And he says, like, you're on my house account. Rhys, can I be on your house account?
Please.
And like he's like, you can buy whatever you want, like if you want to buy a hat. And she's like, oh well, like there's like this little lingerie store. She calls them like lacy under things. She's like, oh, there's like a lingerie store, and he's like, I'm not in the mood or whatever. And she's like, well, maybe I should just send some of those lacy under things to Tarquin. So she goes to like leave, and she starts having this whole vision about how like her and Rhys would go to this lingerie store, and he would shut the store down, and like they would have this whole encounter. But then she realizes that this is Rhys in her head, and he like is like laughing down the bond, and he and I'm like, I just love him so much. And also she tells him like, at one point when she says like she should send Tarquin like the lingerie, and he's like, you think so highly of yourself, and she's like, why wouldn't I? You stare at me all the time. And he's like, am I supposed to deny that I find you attractive? I've told you several times. And she says like, maybe you should do better. And he's like, is that a challenge? I love them so much. And then so after that whole thing, like she goes to bed, and then I put Rhys has a naked nightmare. So that night, like she wakes up, like the whole house is shaking. She goes into Rhys's room, and he's like kneeling down. Rhys obviously sleeps naked. And she's like, don't look down, don't look down. I would have been like, girl, look down. Girl, look down. But anyways, he's having a nightmare, and like she basically does for him what he always does for her. But girl, look down. Okay. So Amren is trying to translate the half of the book, and the next day, like Rhys sends a thank you note to Feyre just for like helping him through this nightmare. And she had noticed that he has these like tattoos of I think it's mountains. I'm just assuming because I can't remember, but I know everyone gets these tattoos now. But he has like mountains on his knees, and she asks like, what does that mean? And he says it's just a reminder to never bow before like he doesn't bow to anything except his crown. And I'm like, oh, I love that. I love that so much. Amren is literally using her blood ruby as a paperweight. Like she does not give a fuck. She don't care. And because Rhys was like, I don't even want to tell Amren because she's gonna go over there and kill everyone in the Summer Court. And so Feyre's like, oh, like did Rhys like talk you out of killing them? And Amren's like, no, but she's like pointing, and there's like a diamond or something necklace, and Varian sent it to her. Ooh. And so Feyre's like, oh, did you guys, and she's like, no. Okay. And so basically like from here, like Feyre just basically keeps training. But finally the queens do respond, and they agree to come to her family home. So they go back to their house, and we learn that the queens can winnow. So they basically had asked for a exact map and layout of every room of the house and like where stuff was in the house. And they basically tell them that they have like magic given to them by the Fae so that they can winnow. So the queens come, and they're basically all different like ages, all different ethnicities. Like the oldest one, I want to say she's probably like black, I think is what it's basically trying to say. And then there's like a younger one, there's like a blonde one, the golden queen, there's all different ones. Only 5 of the 6 of them are there. They say that the 6th one is sick, and that's why she didn't come. And Feyre's wearing a crown. And they're like, that's interesting. Like, aren't you an emissary? Like, emissaries wear crowns in the night court. And Rhys is like, I mean, no, I think she looks good in it. marry me, please. Where do I sign? What do you want me to sign? What do I need to, like, a blood oath? I don't know. And so basically, like, Rhys tells them, you know, everything that's going on, and the queens say, like, yeah, we know that there's going to be a war, but they basically are like, they don't care about, like, the human land that's by the wall because it's a small territory, and they're not going to, like, sacrifice their armies over there, so, like, basically, those people can die. And obviously, Feyre and, like, her sisters are like, what? Because Nesta's like, there are, like, servants here, there's kids here, like, what the heck? And they're like, well, I mean, the Fae can protect them, like, that's the least they can do, this is their war. And Rhys is like, I mean, there's fault on both sides, you know, whatever. And they don't want to give them the book. And so they're like, well, why would we believe you, Rhys? Because they're like, we've heard how terrible the High Lord of the Night Court is, all these things. And they want proof that he's a man of peace. And so basically he's like, he will give it to them. And they are like, okay, well, when you give that to us, then we'll see. And they leave. And Feyre basically knows, like, he's going to show them Valaris, which we hate. So they try to think of different ways they can give the book, but everything that they were saying, Rhys is like, all of those things could possibly, like, set off the book melting, you know, pretty much. And so he's like, no, like, we're not going to do that. So he wants to show them Valaris. So they're like, you're going to bring them to Valaris? And he's like, no, there's basically, like, this orb thing that's in the Court of Nightmares that comes from Mor's line, which Mor's power is supposed to be truth, which we never really, like, get into that. But so it's basically an orb that is supposed to, like, let them know that this is not, because obviously Rhys has mind power, so it'd be very easy for them to be like, no, Rhys is just tricking us. But this orb allows them to see Valaris, but not go there, but know that it's not like a mind thing. So they have to go to the Court of Nightmares to get it. So, and Mor was like, well, I can just go to, like, the Queen's castle, and Azrael's like, absolutely not, like, it's a death trap. He said it was built by the Fae, so, like, anybody that goes in will, like, basically die. And Feyre's like, well, maybe we can get, like, Miriam and Draken. So Draken is a Fae that ended up mated to Miriam. So again, Miriam was, like, the half Fae, half human that got, like, a long life. And essentially, everyone thinks that Miriam and Draken are dead because Jurian loved Miriam. And that was kind of like part of the war. But when Jurian died, they basically told everyone that Miriam and Draken drowned, but they didn't. They're, like, off on some island hidden away. And Rhys is like, no, like, I'm not going to expose, one, like, he's like, one, that doesn't prove that I'm a nice guy, and two, I'm not going to expose their secret. So, yeah, so that's basically that. So Rhys tells Mor to let her father know that they're coming for a visit to the Court of Nightmares. So when they go, the plan is, like, they're going to distract Keir, Mor's dad, and that Azrael will sneak down to wherever and steal the orb so that they can show the queens. So Feyre's actually pretty shocked that he's willing to risk his people, but I was like, well, you gave him all that shit about not doing it under the mountain. Like, now you're like, oh, I can't believe you're willing to do it. And Rhys is like, I'm debating asking you to stay home because, like, he basically has to put on this facade of, like, you know, the evil Night Court High Lord when he's down there, and he doesn't want her to see that. And I said, I love evil Rhys. Like, I love it. And so she also asked, like, why is Mor scared to go? And that is where we get, like, the backstory of Mor that I've already explained. So, he also asked Feyre to basically play a role. So she's going to kind of play his mistress. So kind of like when in ACOTAR, when she was under the mountain and he was, like, giving her the wine and dressing her in, like, the dental floss. That's basically what he wants her to do again. So they're flying to the night court, the Court of Nightmares, and he's, like, really tense. So she tries to lighten the mood, and she tells him, like, Aaron and Mor told me that, like, the size of a wingspan is supposed to be, like, the size of a male's member, basically. And they also told me that Azrael is the biggest. So that's what they say. I don't know. And then she, like, runs a finger along Rhys's wings, and he's like, oh, that's really sensitive. And she's like, how? And so he, like, blows in her ear, and he's like, it's kind of like that. And he's like, we protect our wings at all costs. And he's like, basically, like, insects, like, if you, like, touch our wings, like, it's, like, the biggest deal or whatever. He says, but he's never let anyone touch his wings during sex or anything like that. He's never trust anyone to do that. So as they're flying and they're talking about this, a bunch of ash-tipped arrows, which can wound, poison, and kill a Fae, start getting shot at Rhys. So he's pissed, rightfully so. And they land, and he's like, take her to the townhouse or whatever, or, like, the Moon Palace or wherever. And she's like, no, like, I'm not going anywhere. So they like look, try to see who was shooting. They can't find it, so they're like, whatever, we got to do what we came to do. So they go to the Court of Nightmares. So she's barely covered. She's wearing dental floss again, but she is wearing a crown this time. And she goes in with Moore, and Moore's dad is like, "Where is he?" And she's like, "He comes when he wants to come." Like, yeah, that's Rhysand. He does what he wants to do. And then, like, as he's approaching, like, she tells the crowd, like, Rhys is approaching and he's in a foul mood, so you better be on your best behavior. I would eat this up. And so they're, like, in the, like, throne room or whatever. And so Cassie and Adriel come in first, and she's like, they're completely different than, like, their normal selves. Like, they are these, like, brooding, mean, menacing Illyrian soldiers. And then, Rhys like comes in, and like normally Rhys has like his power on a leash, but like no, so like he's like let it go. He doesn't have his wings out though, and like literally everyone bows down to him. I'm dead. I'm deceased. And so like he comes in, he sits on the throne, and he makes her sit on his lap, and like he literally like this whole time like he starts talking to Kier. He's like giving reports, and he's like rubbing on Feyre, like kissing on her, like licking her neck, like but he's like making eye contact with Kier. Like, so what are we talking about? What are we talking about? I'm not talking to you right now. I can't pay attention. I'm not focused. You want to have a conversation with me? I'm dead. I'm flabbergasted. Okay. And Farrah's like, she is fine with it. You know, the funny thing about this book, is, you know, they throw the word whore around a lot because she's like, of course, like everyone out there is like calling her a whore. They called Rhys a whore. I don't care. I don't care. So I am unwell. Anyways, you know what? I think this might be my favorite. I don't even care about chapter 55. We haven't even got there, but like this might actually be my favorite chapter. But anyway, so like as he's like doing this, he's talking to Kier, and like he accidentally like kind of like rubs like up against Feyre, and like she's aroused, and but he tells her, and this is so sad. He tells her like it's okay, like it's just your body's physical response, and that is so freaking sad because like you know like obviously he was sexually abused, and like that was probably what he told himself. Like with Amarantha, like I do not like Amarantha, like my body, I just like I'm just physically responding to her, like that's just natural, and that is so disgustingly sad. Like I hate that for him, like poor baby Rhys. But that is not the case for Feyre. That is not just her body. Homegirl likes this. And so Feyre actually starts feeling guilty about Tamlin, because she's like, it's only been 2 months.
Oh.
Who cares? But Azriel comes in, and like him and like Moore do this like. I don't like Moore, and I get to this later, but like him and like Moore do like this little hug thing, like which is a signal that he got what he needed or whatever. So he tells Feyre like she can go with Cassian, and so she walks past Kier, and Kier's like whore, and Rhys is like what? So he makes Kier come up and is like,
love this part.
He grabs him like with his power and like puts him on his knees, and he's like, what did you say? He doesn't want to say anything, so he literally like shatters his like hand and arm into like several pieces, and then he's like, you can't even see, he's like tells him, he's like, don't you even see a healer about it? If I hear that you saw a healer about your arm, like I'll be back, I'm gonna do worse. And then he like knocks him unconscious, and then he calls over like another servant and is like, finish the report. I'm so unwell. So after that, like Rhys winnows them to a lake before they go home, and he apologizes for like everything that happened on the throne, and Feyre's like, you don't have to apologize, like it's perfectly fine. And she begs him like, please don't lock me out, and he tells her like, stop comparing me to Tamlin. Like, I'm not going to lock you in the house. I'm not going to do all these things. Like, I am not Tamlin. Stop comparing me to him. Which, fair. Like, please.
Right.
Please. And he says, like, I will always be seen as the bad guy. Tamlin's always going to be seen as the good guy. Like, I'm going to be the bad guy in the story. And he asks her, like, what does she want? And of course, and he's like, of course you don't know. Like, because she knows that she wants Rhys at this point, and she just can't be honest with herself yet because she feels guilty about Tamlin. And she hurts his feelings, so they go home and they just go their separate ways. But she does finally admit to herself that she does want Rhys, and she's willing to try, like, to just see what would happen between them. So she waits for him that night and the next morning, but he never comes to her. So she goes to see Amren, and Amren's like, oh, you're the reason that Rhys bit my head off this morning. And she tells her, like, Rhys went to go hunt down whoever was shooting at them the night before. And Feyre asked if it was the Summer Court, but, like, we don't know. So they are planning to go to an Illyrian camp in 2 days because they're basically just waiting to hear back from the queens now that they have this little orb. And they're not going to go today because it is Starfall tomorrow, and this is the first Starfall they're going to have together in 50 years. And Amren tells her that basically when Rhys came home from under the mountain, he was a ghost too, but Feyre has really made him come alive again. And she runs into Cassian because she still hasn't seen Rhys, and Cassian's like, Rhys is sulking like up at the House of Wind, and so Feyre like keeps writing him notes, but he's like not even picking up, like he's not picking them up, he's not coming and getting them. So we go to Starfall, and Feyre is literally dressed like a fallen star, like her gown is like she's like dripping in stars, and Cassian flies her to the House of Wind, and everyone's there but Rhys. And Moore tells Feyre about like her part of the story about what happened with Cassian. She's like, I never want to sleep with Cassian again, and like, no, I won't sleep with Azriel. But Rhys sneaks up, and basically he's like, I just needed time. Like he felt guilty about everything, and he tells her about the stars. So basically, like, because she's like, what is Starfall? And she like they look up, and like literally stars are like falling from the sky. Like it's just like so beautiful. And he tells her like not only was he under the mountain for 50 years, but Amarantha knew what Starfall was because other places can like they like can experience it, but they can only like really see it in the night court. And like on Starfall, Amarantha made him like serve as her on those nights specifically because she knew what Starfall meant to him. So this is the first time. And so while they're talking, Feyre gets smacked in the face with like a star, and like she thought she was gonna go blind, and he like starts laughing, and then she gets pissed, but he's like, no, like smile, like that's the first time you've ever smiled at me. And then he gets like smacked with one, and like she's like, oh, like it makes her think of painting, and she's like, oh, I want to paint again. And he apologizes for kissing her under the mountain, and she's like, why? And he's like, because it was rough, and it wasn't pleasant for you, and I was just jealous and angry. And they end up like dancing all night, so it's very cute. So the next day they go to the Illyrian camp, and they basically had danced all night, and Feyre again is still feeling guilty about tampon. Um, and they meet Lord Devlin, God. And so again, all the men at the Illyrian camps are misogynists, and Lord Devlin also is, but he's like the least misogynistic of them all somehow. And so we learned that Lord Devlin was actually the one who gave Cassian, Azriel, and Rhys like even a chance at the right. So the right is basically all the Illyrian warriors, like they train all their life, and when they turn like 18 or whatever it is, they have the chance to go to the like I can't think of what the mountain's called, but they have this mountain, and they go out there. They're dropped in this like mountain for like days, and they're trying to get to the top of the mountain. There's like this black stone. They can't use their powers. They can only use like their fighting skills, and like they might have to kill each other. All these things, and so Devlin actually let them do it, and he let them like claim their like fame for it because other like lords probably wouldn't. So like they're not like so hard on Devlin because like he's the most reasonable. But we learn like the camps are supposed to be allowing the female warriors to train, and like when they get there, they're like, oh, they're doing their chores, even though they're supposed to train before doing their chores. And they learn like it's been 10 days since the girls trained last. Like it's just like a whole mess. So he sends Cassian to like kind of deal with that. And they're gonna stay at Rhys's mother's house, and like Devlin's like, well, my like highest like lords are there, and he's like, okay, we'll get it unoccupied and make them clean it first. So yeah. So let's see. He also tells Feyre a little bit more about Tamlin. So when Tamlin is younger than Rhys, and he says like he actually kind of felt bad for Tamlin, because all of Tamlin's brothers hated him because obviously they knew Tamlin would be the High Lord. So they were really like crappy to him. So Rhys befriended Tamlin, and he actually used to train him a little bit in the Illyrian ways, which Rhys and Tamlin's dad did not like. So basically, like we know that Rhys's family dad killed Tamlin's, but we didn't really get the full story. So what actually happened was Rhys was supposed to go visit or meet his mom and his sister, and he had a change of plans, and Tamlin knew that. So Tamlin and his dad and like some of his brothers went to wherever he was supposed to meet his sister and his brother, and they were going to kill all of them, but Rhys wasn't there, so they killed his sister and his mom. They cut off their heads and like shipped them downriver in boxes, and then they took their wings. Obviously, like rightfully so, pissed off Rhys's dad. So then Rhys and his dad went to the manor and killed all of Tamlin's family. But Rhys was upset because his dad said like he wouldn't touch Tamlin's mom, but then he did. So then when he went to try to kill Tamlin, Rhys was trying to stop him. Tamlin opened the door and then killed Rhys's dad. And then like that left that left Rhys and Tamlin, but then like both of them got like their High Lord powers at the same time, so they basically like Rhys basically fled, and then that is kind of the culmination, which really like kind of hurts like Feyre, because Feyre's like, Rhys could have told me that. Like Tamlin obviously told like his side of it,
Right.
but Rhys didn't do that, and she's like, why? And Rhys is like, I didn't want to turn you against Tamlin. Like I didn't want to tell you that just to like get you on my side. And so this again, like for whatever reason, this sparks Feyre's like desire to want to paint. So Feyre decides, like, while they're out at the Lyran camp, she's gonna go out to the forest and she's trying to practice her fire, and she gets surrounded by Lucien and some of the sentries from the Spring Court. So Lucien tells Feyre that they've been hunting her for 2 months and they got a tip that she was nearby and they scented her. And she tells him, like, he reaches for her and she's like, no. And he says, like, she's pointing a bow and arrow at him. And he's like, let's go home. And she's like, that stopped being my home when you let him lock me up. And she knows, like, if he touches her, then he'll winnow her away. And he's like, Tamlin is sorry. Like, we have to go home. And he, like, lunges for her, but she winnows. And then Rhys is right there next to her. And Lucien is like, he'll never stop looking for you. And he's like, what did Rhys do to you? Because she literally grows freaking bat wings. And she's like, she was like, if you're put in the dark, something like she's put in the darkness long enough, then you'll start to accept the darkness or something like that. Like, something badass. And she tells like Lucien, like, you gave up on me basically. And she tells Lucien, like, tell Tamlin if anybody from the Spring Court comes back in these lands again, like, basically she'll kill them. So then they go. And I was like, yes. So they leave, Rhys flies them out, and we get to the inn scene. So they go to this inn to stay, and there's only one room, but this time there's only one bed, and it's like this tiny little room in this attic. So they have to stay, and like Rhys is trying to like he's trying to like an Illyrian, not the High Lord. So they have this like one little room, and they're like soaking wet because it was raining. And Rhys is trying not to use his magic because people can track it, so he can't like dry them off and stuff like that. So Feyre's like thinking to herself, like, while Rhys went to go get them food, how Tamlin just disregarded her letter, which, like, duh, he disregarded everything you've ever said to him. And how Lucien was, like, basically going to force her to go, which, yeah, he does everything Tamlin says. And so when Rhys come back, like, he admits to her, like, if she had decided to go with Lucien, he wouldn't have stopped her. But she's like, well, what if he would have grabbed me? And he's like, I would have ripped the world apart to get you back. So he tells her, like, basically, like, he can't resist her, but, like, this room is too small to properly bed you, especially with the wings. Ooh. But they do have, like, a little bit of time, and, like, she does touch his wings, but then they go to bed. So we have, like, a, like, very small, short moment. But the next day, they are flying, and Rhys gets struck with ash arrows. Oh, I'm so excited. So, I know, I'm so excited Rhys got struck with ash arrows. So they fall from the sky, and they're separated. And, like, Feyre's pissed, because she's like, where the fuck is Rhys? Like, she can't see him, so she literally, like, transforms into, like, this, like, huntress beast thing with, like, night vision. And she, like, hunts him down. She finds him in a cave, and he's, like, tied up with these, like, magic chains, and he's being whipped. And she kills all of them. She gets him away, and she's, like, pulling all of the arrows out. And she's able to, like, winnow him, but obviously she's not as strong. And so she's, like, talking to him, and she's just trying to, like, keep, like... I'm terrified. I don't know what's going on. So she's talking to him, like, just trying to keep him with her. And she's, like, telling him, like, about painting. And she's like, oh, like, I used to paint. Like, I painted the dresser. We had, like, one dresser for the three of us to share. And I painted flowers for Elaine. I painted fire flames for Nesta. And I painted the night sky for me. I'm giving, like, the strongest side eye. But she says, I never knew why. Like, I didn't like nighttime or anything. And so Rhys is basically like, he's poisoned and he's dying. So she's like, you know what? I'm about to go find the cereal because that's going to answer my stuff. So the cereal tells her, like, your blood is the cure because you have Dawn Court powers and that High Lord can cure things. And the cereal also says, if you wish to speed up your mate's healing, there's a pink flower that grows near the water or the river. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? Did you say mate? I'm sorry. So she's like, what? And the cereal says, oh, like, you didn't know? And she says, and the cereal says, the High Lord is your mate. So she's pissed because, like, Rhys promised, like, he would not lie to her. So she goes back, she gives him some blood and gives him the flowers, and she's like, all right, don't lie to me. How long have you known? And he says, like, look, I suspected it for a while, and then he felt it slap into place that day after Amarantha on the top of the mountain when he, like, looked all crazy and then like disappeared. And he said he wanted to tell her when it seemed like she was ready, and he wanted to tell her the other night at the end. But that night at the end, they had been talking, and he was like, "What do you want?" She's like, "I just want to have fun. I just want a distraction." Like basically, kind of like friends would benefited him. So like he was like, okay, like obviously she doesn't want to be with me, so he didn't tell her then. So she's like, I don't want to hear it, and like she also knows like more knows and like other people. So she's like, I don't want to hear how you and your friends like decided what was best for me. So she's like, take me back to camp. So they get back. She like dumps him on the snow and is like, tells Moore, get me out of here. So Moore takes her to a cabin. That Moore says is like a family cabin, and no one can winnow in except for like she can get in there, and she's like, oh, why? Because I'm his mate. And Moore's like, oh, he told you, and she's like, no, he didn't. So she's there, and like she's like, and Moore's like, well, no, Moore's like getting ready to say, she's like, I don't want to hear it. And Moore's like, you know, it really killed him not to tell you, and he's very happy like when he's with you. And Feyre's like, I don't care. And Feyre spends like a couple of days there. She's like basically thinking, you know, she does feel better knowing that she doesn't feel like so much as a traitor to Tamlin, knowing that she has a mate. And she does like realize, she's like, I mean, if he had told me, like, what would I have done? Like she knows that she probably would have reacted ridiculously. So she basically spends time like kind of coming to terms. And this is when the most ridiculous thing happens. This girl finds paint and starts to paint the weirdest shit ever. She paints Amren's eyeballs on the cabin walls.
I'm just saying, of all things, like
Flowers, snow, stars, eyeballs. Okay. Which Moore comes to visit and is like, are these Amren's eyes? And then Moore's like, well, paint my eyes. I want them to know I'm watching them. What? Okay. Anywho.
Not creepy at all.
So she spends a couple of days up there, and then like Moore leaves one morning, and like she gets dressed or whatever, and she hears a knock at the door. She's like, oh, Moore's back, and it's Rhys. So Rhys is at the door. He's mostly healed. He says like he had to track her down because Moore wouldn't tell, but he couldn't use his magic still, so he basically had to fly around and find her. And she goes to make him soup, and he tells like, she's like, I don't know the rules, and he basically says, you know, like to confirm a mating bond, the female Fae will make soup for their mate. And so while she's making the soup, he basically kind of tells her everything, and he tells her like a lot of backstory. So Rhys tells her like, he was captured by Amarantha during the First War, and during that time, he was bound by the same magical chains as the other knight, and he was like, if they would have cut off my wings, like that's the one thing that can make him yield. He was away from Cassian Azrael then, and he talks about like he saw Amarantha kill Jurian then, and how his dad had made them like had come and saved him kinda, but made them leave the ash arrows in his wings as punishment for getting caught in the first place. And that was when the wall was built. And then he talks about how, you know, how all this time he's wanted to kill Amarantha. And so 50 years ago, he had went to that party, planning on killing her, but he was so focused on killing her that he didn't even think about testing his wine for poison, which is how he got caught. So at the last moment before he lost all his powers, he like, you know, wiped everybody's mind, shielded Valaris, and sent out a message to Cassian and Azrael, basically telling them what was happening. And so he said while he was trapped in the mountain, he would get images from Feyre, which he didn't know at the time, but he said at first it was like little snippets, like a rabbit in the woods. And then he saw a hand painting. And then he said he sent that person images of the night sky, which is why Feyre painted the night sky on her dresser and didn't know why. And then about a year ago, she started having nightmares, and he realized she was in Prythian because it was like the bog, but he didn't know where because it was all these creatures that belonged to all these different courts. But then one night she had a dream about the preparation for Calamai, and he knew that she was in the spring court. So he told Amarantha, like, I want to go to the spring court and see if there's any traitors. So Amarantha was like, oh yeah, go, whatever. So he went, and he said like some nights when he would dream, like he could even smell her, so he knew her scent. So when he got there, he scented her, and he said he saw those fairies like holding her, and he was like, you know, he was instantly like mad, but he said he was surprised like that he could see her, but he was almost like upset that he ever even saw her because he knew that like nothing good could come from this. And he said he never wanted to see her again because he suspected that she was his mate, and that if anyone found out that they would kill her. So he found the fairies that like had like accosted her that night, and he wiped their minds and had taken them to Amarantha like they were traitors. And then he said when he had come back that time, and like made Tamlin and Lucien get on their knees and bow, that was to scare them and her, so that Tamlin would send her back to the human world because he wanted her as far away as possible. And then when he says that when he did give Claire Better's name, he said he really didn't know that that was a real name. And he said, so when they tortured Claire Better, he said he like did take control of her mind. So she never felt any of the pain that happened to her because he felt so bad. And he said that when they ransacked Tamlin's home and like went and got them, he did go with them to like make sure that Feyre had gone back to the human world. So it was to his worst surprise when Feyre got brought in by the Adder because she brought her stupid self back under the mountain to save freaking Tamlin. And then he said that, he talks about like betting on her with the worm, all these things. And then he said he was terrified when she bargained with Amarantha, and he said that Amarantha knew that something was up when he kissed her, and like knew that he was jealous, and that night when he had kissed her after like he had caught her and Tamlin, that Amarantha made him have sex with her and was like basically trying to get answers out of him, but he was like, oh, she's nothing, like it's nothing. But like when she died, he said he like wrapped all his power around the bond. He was just trying to do anything to save her. And so like that was that home feeling that she had told the bone carver that she felt. It was like that bond that they had. And so she asked if he loves her, and he says yes. And so she says, then eat. So he eats his soup. And then I just put they had sexy paint time. So basically they confirmed their mating bond because they had sex. But Feyre had like paint everywhere, so they literally like are covered in paint while they do this. So after that, like she's pretty much tells him like she's honored to be his mate, and they go back to the Illyrian camp. And Cassian tells Rhys like Feyre doesn't look too tired, like maybe she can give him a ride. So they have like a whole fight, and really Cassian did that because Rhys was pissed off, and so it was basically to let off steam. And Moore tells her like welcome to the family, and they learn like that they heard from the queen, so they go and meet with them. The queens find out that they basically are like pissed and like it's unfair that Feyre was made to be immortal. And she still doesn't want Rhys to show them Valaris, but he does. And this time only the Golden Queen and which is the youngest one, and the oldest queen, the Crone, come. And he shows them everything, and they are shocked and surprised. They appreciate his trust, and they said they'll reconsider, but they have to go talk to the rest of their queens about it. He also had written them a letter, which he wrote this before chapter 55. And it basically, he said, as a male, he was writing them not as a high lord. He was writing them as a male in love with a human woman, or a woman who was once human, to save her people. And they were like, oh,
you stole my heart.
I know. And they said that, but they go, you could still be manipulating us. And they're like, what? And so Nesta's pissed. Like, she's like, give them the book. And they're like, what? And she's like, give them the book. And so like then she starts saying please, and Feyre's like, I don't think I've ever heard Nesta say please in my life. And so Cassian like goes to Nesta's side and is like, I'll fight by your side. And so then the queens leave, and they realize under the Golden Queen's chair was a lead box, and she left them the book. So Rhys goes and gets it, and this time he can open it because it wasn't spelled like by any High Lord. And there was a note from the Golden Queen who said that she believed them and believed his letter, and that she also wants peace, but she tells them that if anyone asks, they need to say that they stole it, and that they shouldn't trust the other queens, and that the sixth queen is not ill, which is what they said. So Rhys tells Elaine and Nesta that like from this point forward, they can come to like Valaris with them, or they can stay at the house, but they'll need like guards. And Nesta basically like leaves it up to Elaine, but since Elaine's engaged, she, of course she wants to stay. And Feyre, and then Nesta looks at Feyre and like knows about their bond, and she's like, that's why you painted stars. So like she puts it together. So the rest of the inner circle, they go back to Valaris, and they give Amryn the book. So she's like working on it like right away. And really like from this point on, like they're basically just kind of like waiting, training, like they're going to the like Rhys goes to the Night Court, or to the Court of Nightmares, all these things. And so one day Cassian and Feyre are like kind of just sitting, and then all of a sudden Cassian kind of like senses something, and this is cool. He like hits his siphons, and they like turn into like a full body shield. And literally like on the horizon, Feyre sees like this giant black mask, and they are under attack. So the freaking queens have like exposed Valaris. And they're like, they hear like something like splat, and literally the adder flew in and dropped the Golden Queen's body. They had like scalped her and ripped out her eyes, and then they drop her like on a pole that impales her, so she dies. So like Cassian tries to like send up these like shields with his siphons, and it's really not like working. So Feyre starts fighting, and she's like using her water wolves, she's using her ice. They're all defending, but then she sees the adder, and like that is like her main thing because she's got beef with the adder, and so she like is able to like get in the sky. She like jumps on the adder and she stabs the adder 3 times. She's like, "This is for Rhys, this is for Claire Better, and this is for me." And like she like drops the adder to the ground, and no more adder. So like yeah, she did that. So they're able to like kill everything, save the city, fix the wards. And Amryn is able to like decode the book or whatever. She says that to nullify the cauldron, they have to like touch it and like recite the spell from the book. And so Cassian's like, okay, well, let's just go. Like, we can winnow in there real quick, do it, get out. If we can't get it done in enough time, we can take the cauldron with us. And they're like, well, we don't even know where it's at. And Azrael's like, no, I've been going there, like spying, and I pretty much know where it's at. So they're like, Rhys has got to stay behind though, because they'll detect it. And Rhys is like, you want me to stay outside while my mate goes inside? And so, but he tells her, he's like, Feyre, if you want to go, you can go. And she's like, if I didn't already love him, I loved him more. So, they're like still at the Illyrian camp, or they go back there. And so, or I don't know. Or were they back in the townhouse? Wherever they are, Feyre goes to her room, because she's like, when she was with Tamlin, they always slept separate. And so Rhys is like, are we sleeping in your room tonight? Because either we're sleeping in your room or my room, but like wherever we're sleeping together. They never clean this building. What is going on?
Right?
They're cleaning, whatever. So she's like, oh, well, your bed's bigger. So they go in his room, and he gives her the ring that she got from the Weaver and Rhysand. So he tells her that this was like, he used to have this ring, but his mother took it back and said that she gave it to the Weaver and told him that one day his mate would need to retrieve it from the Weaver, and that his mate would either need to be strong enough or smart enough to get it back from the Weaver, and if they weren't, then they wouldn't survive the bond anyways. And so Feyre's like, you made me retrieve my own wedding ring? And then she's like, well, do you want me to wear it? And he's like, I mean, do you want to wear it? And she does, but she's like, well, what if I wear it to Hybern and then like they know? Because she's like, is that gonna be like cause a problem if they find out that we're mates? And he's like, probably, but I mean, whatever. So the next chapter I put like suited and booted for Hybern. So like Feyre gets like all like covered in like, she's like got all this Illyrian stuff on, and basically Cassian winnows her into like the area, and then like Mor and Azriel were already like in the castle or whatever, so they go in and Rhys stays out. She gets in and like she starts touching the book and the cauldron, and it's like pain, and like the books want to be, they're like, put us together, and like she's like feeling all this misery, and like nothing's really happening. It's just like a lot of torture going on. And while all this happens, Jurian walks in. So as soon as Jurian comes in, Rhys comes in because he was ready. And Rhys like grabs the book and hides it away real fast. And Jurian asks Mor like, where's Miriam? Because again, he liked Miriam as well. And so Mor's like, her and Draken drowned. And Jurian's like, you're a horrible liar, like whatever. And she's like, okay, like she's gone. She doesn't want to be with you. And Jurian says that really I'm just down here as a distraction because the King of Hybern has spelled the castle and now you guys can't leave. And so Rhys starts like kind of antagonizing him, because mentally he's working on de-spelling whatever spell the King of Hybern is working on. And then the king comes in, and I laugh because Feyre says that he was blandly handsome. And he freaking shoots Azriel with an ash arrow in the chest. And so he takes them to their throne room, and who comes in but Lucien and Tamlin?
Of course.
So Feyre's like, no, because Tamlin like reaches for her, and Rhys is like, at what cost? What did you like sacrifice? Hybern says that, well, first of all, they agreed that Feyre will work for me when she goes back to her husband, or soon-to-be husband. Like, he's throwing shade at Tamlin, and he's working for him. And Jurian says that, or Hybern says, well, Jurian wants Rhys dead, and he wanted to know who all his friends were, so that was part of the deal. And Feyre tells Tamlin, like, I'm not going with you. And Hybern like, oh, well, you'll say different shortly. And he says that he's going to break the bargain between Rhys and Feyre. Tamlin says that Rhys must have used that bond to manipulate her, And like that's the reason he was gone all the time. He was trying to find a way to break the bond. And she notices that Jurian is like aimed to attack more. And so Feyre's like, okay, like I gotta figure something out. So she's like, look, I'll come with you if you just don't hurt my friends. And she starts like in her mind, she's like trying to talk to the spell, and she's like, I'm like you. Like she's trying to use that power so that the spell can't hold her. And then Tamlin lunges for her, and it works. So she's able to winnow, and like she moves, and then Rhys like boom punches him. I was like right on. But as she does that, Tamlin and Hybern both realize that they are bond. They are like have a mated bond, and Tamlin is pissed. And so she tells Tamlin like, if you take me from my mate, I will destroy everything you love. And he says like, you don't know what you're talking about. Gaslighter. Mm-hmm. Like what do you mean? Like what do you mean? How can you like lie about a mating bond? Like what do you mean I don't know what I'm talking about? So as they're having this conversation, some women walk in, and it's the 4 queens. And after that, they bring in Nesta and Elaine, and they've been kidnapped. So the king says, I actually didn't want the Book of Breathings, but then you guys started snooping around, and it made me start snooping around. So he like brought Jurian back to life, and he sent them to the queens as an emissary because he's a human. And he says that Ianthe is also on his team. So Ianthe basically wants to get rid of all the High Lords, and she wants the priestesses to rule. And because Feyre had told Ianthe all about her family, Ianthe is actually the one who sold out Nesta and Elaine. That bitch. Which Tamlin's also shocked about this. Surprise, surprise. So also, like, the King of Hybern sends off this like flash of light, which destroys Cassian's wings. So now, like, Az is down, Cassian's down. Mor's, like, holding on to both of them for dear life. They force Elaine into the cauldron, and then she gets dumped out, and now she's a Fae. And then Nesta gets forced in, but she's, like, pointing this finger at the King of Hybern as she goes in. And then she comes out, Feyre realizes, like, something's different about Nesta than Elaine. And it's almost like she took something from the cauldron when she came out. And then, surprise, surprise, Lucien is like, Elaine's my mate. What? What? So Feyre realizes, like, this is not working out. Like, nothing, like, she sees, like, all her friends are hurting. Like, the King of Hybern's winning. So she's like, you know what? Like, she sends a message, like, mentally to Rhys, and she's like, I gotta do what I gotta do. So she flashes, like, a light, which also, like, kind of busts the hole open. And she acts as if, like, a spell is broken. And she's like, Tamlin? And she's like, oh, please, like, get me away from Rhys. Like, I'm terrified of him. Like, what did he do to me? She starts begging the king, like, please break the bond, break the bond, break the bond. And, like, Rhys, like, looks mortified. He's like, what? Like, what is going on? And so the King of Hybern breaks the bond. And she's like, Tamlin, please take me home. Tamlin tells Rhys, like, I don't care if she's your mate. Are you a Fae? Like, what do you mean? Like, you established all these rules in the last book. And now these rules don't matter.
Right.
And so mentally, though, Feyre is telling Rhys, like, take my sisters and go. And because Feyre had, like, blasted that light, Mor's able to, like, grab them. And, like, they all start, like, winnowing out. And Lucien is, like, hurt because obviously his mate just went flying out the door with the Night Court. So we switch over to Rhys's point of view real fast. And they are all back in the Night Court. So Amren is the only one that wasn't with them. And she's like, where is Feyre? Like, where is Feyre? And he starts, like, sending demands. And Mor tells Amren, like, everything that just happened. And, you know, we learn, so basically, again, so Tamlin offered passage also to the King of Hybern because his court is the court that borders the wall. Mm-hmm. So, like, he needs that court to get to the wall. And he also, you know, sold out the Night Court. And then she also tells Amren about the queens and about what happens to the sisters. And then Rhys is like, Feyre pretended and went with him. And Amren's like, and about the bond. And Amren's like, it is impossible to break a mate bond. Like, she's like, what do you feel? Like, you can't break a mating bond. And Rhys is like, no, you can't break. Like, he says, like, he broke the bargain, but he can't break the mate bond. And Amren's like, okay, well, then you need to go get her. And he's like, no. And Amren's like, so she's a spy? And Amren's like, she's your mate. She's not a spy. And Rhys is like, he feels like down the bond, like there's a little bond there. And he says, she's my mate and my spy. And she is the High Lady of the Night Court. Woo! And he says if they had removed her glove, they would have seen her tattoo. And Moore says, "Not your consort." And he says, "No, my equal in every way. Not on my not on my side. She is my queen. She will wear my crown." Like,
love it, love it.
I love it so much. So switch back over to Feyre real fast, and so she's back in the Spring Court. So she's pretending to be happy. And Lucian is suspicious because he's like, "How did you break free of like all of that?" And she's like, "I don't know. I just wanted to, so I did." And they start asking all these questions, and she's like, "I don't remember anything. Like, I was under a spell. I don't remember anything." And she just tells like Tamlin, like, "Well, please just don't lock me up. Like, I want to talk to you guys about everything. Like, please don't lock me up." And he's like, "Oh no, like I won't. Blah 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 blah. I'm so sorry." And that's where we end. Blech. This is a really long episode. But anyways, okay. So, what do you rate it?
5 stars.
Yes, 5 stars. I love ACOMAS.
Easy 5 stars.
There's so much that goes on, and that was so much information. This is such a long episode, so I'm so sorry. But either you love it or you hate it. But I just can't. I skip stuff, and I don't know. I don't know. So yes, yeah, I give it a 5 stars too. I have no qualms.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, you just gotta get through ACOTAR. I don't think ACOTAR's terrible, but like,
yeah,
we hate Tamlin. Like, you just gotta get through ACOTAR.
It was just the basis, yes. Really, of.
It's just like the foundation. You just
yes. Oh my gosh.
Gotta get through.
So good.
You gotta get through it. So what I was saying with the sniffing thing.
Yeah.
So I think the reason that she was sniffing is because she could smell the mating bond. Because at some point in there, he says, like, he told Moore. Mm-hmm. And then she asked about Amryn, and he says that he just thinks she knew or she figured it out. And I think that's why. I think she could smell it or something.
I mean, she obviously had to have smelled something on her. I mean, to be that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's my thought. Anyways, so I do have the pre-recorded other stuff that we have. So, and I have some fan casts, but I didn't know if you had questions or what you have.
Not really.
Okay. Alright. Did you fan cast?
I did not.
Cool.
Because, yeah. At this point, I'm like, I don't even know.
I did a few. So I'll just mention them.
Okay.
So some of these are like everyone else's fan cast, but like they're literally perfect. So there's no reason to be different. So for Azriel, it's Matthew Daddario.
Okay.
Everyone says that one. Same thing for Cassian. Everyone says it's Can Yemen, I think is how you say it. They're perfect. So, and then look at this. I just showed her a fan art of the eyes in the cabin. I just can't take it serious. I cannot. I can't. And then for Amryn, I had is it Gemma Chan? Is that how you say it?
I think so.
Okay. And for Moore, I said Madison Riley.
Okay.
I want to fan cast Lucian so bad, but I cannot think of like a single person that would be good for him. I can't. Like, I just can't.
Well, and I think it's a little hard because, you know, they talk about how his brothers had kind of darker skin, but he has the darkest skin of them.
Yeah.
But he also has red hair, so it's like hard to kind of.
Yeah. I cannot. I have nothing for him. So.
I've seen a lot of people say, oh, what's his name? Give me a second. What is his name? Jesse Williams from Grey's Anatomy.
Oh. Yeah, I could see it if he had red hair.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what that would look like, but interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. I'm like, I was like trying. I was trying to look at other people's fan casts, but I feel like a lot of people haven't fan casted him either because I was like,
I think he's a hard one to fan cast.
Yes, but ACOWAR, I like ACOWAR more so for like the scenes that like it's not as flirty. So I like it for.
There's a lot of action.
There's a lot of action.
A lot of action.
So I like that for that, but I love like the Feyre and Rhys in this one. It is like chef's kiss. I I just love it. Like there's no complaints. I have nothing. No complaints. So I don't know if I'm gonna keep this part, but it is the end of beginning of November. And Keely finished A Court of Mist and Fury. So before she jumps on the ACOTAR, I have got to like catch her in between these books so that I can ask her questions because she is so like naive and new, and I know, and it's just nice to like I like it. So I might cut that part out and you might not even know that I said that, or I might plug this whole thing into the end of that episode when we do it. So my first question. So now that you know that Rhys and Feyre are mates, there's a theory. Do you think that Tamlin and Amarantha were mates?
I hope you caught that on.
I hope it did. Oh god. Okay.
Oh, the wonders of having other people in this building.
Sweets.
It was probably the attorney. He's always screaming.
I understand. It's a hard job. Okay, so Tamlin and Amarantha, there's a theory. So the theory is that like they're mates, but obviously like Tamlin rejects it. He hates her. But that's why he can't like why under the mountain he just sat there, and like why Amarantha is so like pressed about Tamlin. Just a thought.
That would make sense.
There's no right or wrong answer to that question, but it's just
it's just a theory.
I couldn't actually remember because I'm like, why can't like you would think like that Feyre was his mate or something like so.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, it would make sense.
We'll never know unless Sarah tells us, but it's a theory. So that was my first one. Okay. So you've met the inner circle now, and we like have the sisters in the mix now too. Right? That's what happens at the end. Okay. Okay. Do you have any mate predictions?
Well, they had mentioned Lucien and Elaine. Yes. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know though. But I wouldn't be surprised if Azriel and Moore.
Okay.
Just because there's kind of some chemistry there, but it feels like they're both kind of denying it. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody for anybody else? What else do we have? We have Amren.
Yeah.
Nesta and Cassian. I guess. Any thoughts? Or not mates? Maybe they'll just date or hook up or whatever.
Yeah. Not sure.
Okay. What is your prediction for Lucien and Elaine? What do you think?
Ooh.
So at the end of this, obviously Lucien goes back to the Spring Court with Feyre and Tamlin, and Elaine goes with Rhys and Night Court. But they are mates. I mean, they do say it.
Right. So honestly, I'm not sure. I know that, Feyre had mentioned something about, if Lucien ever wants to see Elaine again, blah, blah, blah. And he definitely, at least it feels like it, is suspicious of her. But I think maybe may end up helping her so that he can get to Elaine. I don't know. We'll see.
Do you have any predictions of powers for Elaine or Nesta?
Ooh.
Do you think they don't have any at all because they're made? Do you think or if they do you think?
I think that Nesta will.
Okay.
Just because some of the things that were said, especially when they were putting her in the cauldron, just kind of hinted. I feel like, yeah.
Have you seen now you probably can't. Have you seen any what I want to say the pictures drawings of that scene? It's so funny.
I've not.
You'll have to find some.
Yeah, but it's just and I feel like it may have to do with her rage.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, I like it. Oh, this is so exciting! I can't wait for you to read it. Okay, a couple more. The mating bond between Rhys and Feyre. What do we think? Because Hybern, she said, obviously, we know what happens, she's in it, but, do you think that it's affected by what he did?
Honestly, I don't think so.
Okay.
But
Okay. Oh wait, she's not in this book. Okay. Good. Okay, so what do you think is gonna happen with Tamlin and Feyre going back to the Spring Court? Like, are they getting back together? Like, do you think we're
no,
gonna
I
have like
don't.
a triangle, like a love triangle?
I don't think so. I think Feyre is really in it to win the war at this point. That she's playing him for what she can do and get out of him, and
Okay.
but
Okay.
no, I don't think Tamlin's going to be in the
mix.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Do you have any death predictions? Do you think anyone's dying? We've got a lot of characters now.
Yeah. I mean, that's always kind of a red flag, especially when you start to get attached to characters. So I don't have any predictions, but I definitely believe that there's going to be someone, if not more than one.
Okay. I'm so excited. I can't wait to read
I'm so ready to read it. I was like, because I was reading it and I was like, I don't want to text her too late, but
you can text me anytime. If I don't see it, I'll text you in the morning. But you can text me at any time. It's fine. It's so good. I just love watching people like, what I would give to do this again for the first time. I just want to read it again for the first time and be like, I'm so rude. I am so deep into ACOTAR talk and like Sarah J. Maas. Like, I gotta like come up for air, and I'm like, I gotta catch Keely in between reading these books because I need to like it's just fun, and then we can look back on it. So
yeah, and I'm definitely, it's already a done deal. I'm going to read her backlist. Like,
yeah, we're gonna do them because we got all of ACOTAR. Then we should do ACOTAR. Then we should do Crescent City because it comes out and it's shorter. And then like Throne of Glass is its own beast of its own. But okay.
And I heard that they're kind of interconnected.
Yes.
Okay.
I won't tell you which ones are what, but yes, there's a massiverse, what we call it. So, it's so exciting. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm like trying to figure out what our next book is.
The Britney Spears memoir, I believe.
Oh, is it? Ooh, okay. Light reading. I consider that to be light on my brain. No theories or anything. So yes, our next book next week is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. So that'll be interesting. That we haven't done a memoir since
Been a
Prince Harry.
while.
So that's just a little different thing, just like brain refresher. So excited about that. We also have we had someone reach out to us, an author. So we have that this month. So I'm excited for that. What else? But anyways, so as always, like our stuff, follow us on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and like our episodes and rate them and review and leave comments.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think what else. I have a laundry list of things to ask you guys every time. This was a long episode, so listen to me talk for 2.5 hours or a little less once I edit it.
And if you have any requests for books for us to read and review and do the podcast over, let us know.
Yes. So we can keep it coming. I'm working on it. All right. That's all I got.
Bye.
Bye.